Chapter 236. Then you don't want that? She said hesitantly. That? What? Wuxia raised his eyebrows, but he quickly understood what she meant. So she was really worried that he would eat her up. Alright, stop fooling around. Come here. His voice hardened. Yunshirshi's shoulders could not help but tremble slightly. She was not very willing in her heart. However, she did not dare to go against his orders. Thus, she moved inch by inch to his side. When she got closer, she could easily smell the faint fragrance on his body. This fragrance was quiet and elegant, just like the fragrance of magnolia. Wuxia caressed her hair with one hand. It was wet, but it still had a warm air to it. He rubbed it hard and raised his eyebrows. You ran out with your hair still wet? It was very easy to get a migraine like this. Women, especially at her age, needed to take care of their bodies the most. If she did not blow-dry her hair in time, the moisture would enter her body. When she was slightly older, she would always have headaches. This girl really did not know how to take care of herself at all. Did she not even know this bit of common sense? Yunshirsher shook her head and said, "My hair usually dries naturally after I take a shower." Wuxia pinched her cheeks. He did not use too much strength, but there was a hint of teasing. Go and get a hairdryer. Otherwise, you'll catch a cold. As soon as he said that, Yunshirsher widened her eyes in disbelief. Was this man concerned about her? Hearing his almost doting tone, Yunshirsher felt a little warm in her heart. One had to know that in all her life, it seemed that only her father cared about her so much and loved her so much. Ever since her father went bankrupt and her family fell, she had to live under someone else's roof. She could be considered to have been treated coldly. Li Qin and Yun Na always treated her indifferently. In school, because she was always immersed in her studies, she was not close to other students. She was considered a loner in school. The homeroom teacher was very caring towards her, but Yunshirsher was really a girl who knew how to be satisfied. She was also a girl who was easily moved. Because of his words, her little face actually turned red. I don't know where to find a hairdryer, in the first drawer of the counter. Oh. Yunshirsher nodded. She stood up and ran in. He opened the first drawer and saw a large white hairdryer. She picked it up. The hairdryer was very beautiful. At first glance, she could tell that it was very suitable for him. It also looked very high-class, just like the ones in the barber shop. However, this hairdryer was really too big and too heavy. She couldn't even hold it with one hand. She felt that it was quite heavy just by holding it, let alone using it. Moreover, her hands were soft and didn't have much strength. The hairdryer was too heavy. After plugging it in, Yunshirsher began to blow-dry her hair clumsily. She rarely used the hairdryer because she had too little time. When she was in school, she had to work, study for credits, and rush out her thesis. After working, she would always go home very late. In the morning, she would squeeze out time to wash her hair and rush to work. She would let the wind blow dry her hair naturally. Therefore, she rarely had the leisure to blow-dry her hair after taking a shower. Because the hairdryer was too heavy, she had no choice but to hold it with both hands and blow her hair with a strong gust of wind. She naturally didn't know much about blow-drying her hair. She only knew that she had to dry it as soon as possible. Therefore, she turned the wind speed to the maximum. This was bad. Her beautiful hair was blown into a mess just like that. Yunshirsher furrowed her brows in annoyance. She clumsily used one hand to tidy up her hair, but it became even messier. Wuxia heard a few soft moans coming from the bathroom from time to time. He couldn't help but feel a little strange. What was this girl doing again? When he walked to the door to take a look, he couldn't help but be stunned. He saw that Yunshirsher's hair was blown into a mess. The ends of her hair were tied up in knots. At this moment, this little idiot was holding up a comb to comb her hair. However, her hair was half dry and half wet. It was difficult to comb it. She was in so much pain that she looked embarrassed. It seemed like she was in so much pain that tears were about to fall. Chapter 237. He lowered his head, looking very patient and very serious. What surprised her was that these messy knots in his hands were quickly defeated in just a short while. Stupid woman, you don't even know how to blow-dry your hair? As Wuxia spoke, he picked up the hairdryer and turned on the gentle wind, gently drying her hair for her. His slender fingers weaved through her hair with the warm wind, drying strands by strands as his fingertips rubbed her acupuncture points from time to time. Such a gentle action made Xianxia sigh contentedly and moan softly. She lazily closed her eyes and her lips couldn't help but curl up in bliss. So comfortable. She occasionally went to the hairdresser's to get a haircut and the hairdresser massaged the acupuncture points on her head like this. The man's technique seemed very professional and didn't lose out to the hairdresser's technique at all. This feeling was really good. In the past, her father had also washed and dried her hair for her. She had lived with her father since she was young, so for a period of time, for her sake, her father didn't hesitate to ask the neighbor's auntie how to tie her hair. Even though the results weren't very good, the twin ponytails were often one high and one low, and the ponytails were tied so tightly that even her scalp felt tight. Because of this, she was mocked by many classmates. But Xianxia still felt that that was the happiest time of her childhood. You seem to be very proficient in this. Xianxia couldn't help but asked curiously, don't talk about ordinary men, even women would be helpless in front of such long and dense hair, but you're able to handle it so easily? When Wuxia heard this, he didn't know why, but his originally curved lips suddenly returned to a cold arc and his expression tensed up. She didn't notice the change in his expression and continued to ask, have you had any experience in the past? Wuxia's actions paused slightly as if he had recalled some past events, and his eyes were tinged with a trace of pain. But very quickly, this emotion was suppressed and disappeared in a flash. Very quickly, he resumed his usual coldness and only said indifferently, in the past, I used to blow hair for people. When Xianxia heard this, she didn't know why, but her heart ached, and strangely, she felt that even her breathing became stuffy. Often, bragging to others? Was it a woman? As she thought of this, she suddenly mocked herself helplessly. Of course it was a woman. Only a woman would have such long hair. Was it Wanru? He often blow-dried her hair. Just like today, when he bragged about himself? Was he going to comb her knotted hair and massage her acupuncture points? Amidst her complicated thoughts, her hair had been blown dry unknowingly. Wuxia put down the hairdryer and hugged her shoulder from behind. Looking at the beautiful person in the mirror, he lifted her beautiful hair with one hand and hooked his lips, so beautiful. Xianxia blushed. Wuxia suddenly lowered his head and sucked on her earlobe. The tip of his tongue tickled her ear, and the man chuckled charmingly. She originally thought that he would do something, but she heard him ask, are you hungry? Xianxia licked her lips and nodded slightly. After a day of nothing, her stomach was already empty. He asked again, what do you want to eat? I'm not eating. I want to hurry home. Wuxia gently pecked her cheek again. You don't have to wait too long. Eat something before you leave, okay? Chapter 238. Wuxia could not help but laugh. At the mention of Yu, he was reminded of the child he had never met before. His son. Yu? What's his name? Tian Yu, she said slowly as she looked at his expression. Tian Yu. Wuxia leaned against the door and muttered a few words before looking at her with his deep eyes. It was a nice name. Tian Yu, when he was just born, he almost lost his life. Perhaps it was because of God's blessing that he grew up healthily. That's why he was given this name. Xianxia explained. He was the child's father, so she felt that it was her duty to let him know the child's name. It's a good name. His surname is Yun. Yun Shishir looked up in surprise and stared at him warily. Seeing that he was just asking casually, she said carefully, yes. He has my surname. Who is he living with now? Mu Yaja asked. He's living with me. He's not living with your father? Yun Shishir's brows furrowed slightly as her heart suddenly ached. Yun Yecheng liked Yu very much. Initially, when she wanted to keep the child, no one, including him, agreed to let her raise him. She was still a student at that time. Her family was in dire straits and she was in debt. What ability did she have to raise a child who was crying piteously for food? Things were not cheap at that time. Just diapers and milk powder alone cost a lot of money every month. Moreover, the child's health was not good. When he was born, they found out that he had a congenital heart deficiency. Secondly, his body was very weak and he had many minor illnesses. It was not that Yun Shishir did not feel strange at all. The older brother was so healthy when he was born, so why was the younger brother so weak? She had asked the doctor about this before, but the doctor explained that the two children were fighting for nutrition in the mother's womb because they were twins. Her brother had absorbed enough nutrients, so even though he was born prematurely, he was still very healthy. As soon as he was born, he cried loudly. His voice was loud and full of energy. Even the doctor who delivered him was amazed. However, his brother was in his mother's womb and did not absorb enough nutrients. Moreover, he was born prematurely in August. When he came out, no matter how hard the nurse slapped his butt, he did not make a sound. His face even turned purple. If it weren't for the nurse's experience and the fact that she saw that the child still had a weak vital sign and hurriedly carried him to the emergency room, the child would have been saved. When he first brought Yu back to the Yun family, Yun Yecheng often frowned at the baby in her swaddling clothes. The child looked delicate and cute, and his big eyes were especially bright. However, the family's conditions did not allow it. Wasn't this holding up the child? Fortunately, when Yu grew older, he displayed intelligence and obedience that was beyond the reach of ordinary children. Only then did Yun Yecheng change his view of the child and devote more love and care to him. However, his love and care undoubtedly attracted the hatred of Li Qin and Yun Na. Yun Shishir alone had taken away half of Yun Yecheng's love and care. Now that this little B***** had appeared out of nowhere, how could Yun Na let it go? Hence, she bullied Yun Tianyu every 2 to 3 days. There was once when Yun Shishir returned home late. Just as she entered the house, she saw Yu expressionlessly hugging the toy that Yun Na had stomped on and sitting in a corner with a disappointed look. Chapter 239. Mommy, is it because Yu is being naughty? Grandma and Auntie don't like Yu. She was heartbroken when she heard that. Yun Na, on the other hand, did not know the truth of the matter. She flew into a rage out of humiliation when Yun Tianyu came and snatched her father's favor from her. Li Qin, on the other hand. She was mean to Yu, and Yun Shishir could not forgive her. She was the one who forced her to sign that contract back then. She sacrificed herself to relieve the Yun family of the huge burden of repaying the debt, yet she was still mean to Yu. How could she forgive her? At this thought, Yun Shishir clenched her fists and slowly said, "Foster mother doesn't like him, so she rented a house outside." She then quickly added, "I'm going back. You must be worried sick about me since I didn't go back last night." With that, she tidied herself up and hurried to the door. Mu Yaja asked from behind, "You're going back by yourself?" "Yes, I'm going back by myself." He smiled. "There's no traffic here. There's a long mountain road outside the manor. Are you sure you want to go back by yourself?" Yun Shishir fell silent and then looked at him helplessly. "Send me back." Yun Shishir had yet to return, and the sky outside the window was already dark. Yu did not eat much the whole day, so his stomach was growling. If it were in the past, he would definitely prepare dinner and wait for his mommy to come back for dinner, but now that it was already past 7, he was afraid that his mommy would not be back in time. He was too lazy to cook, so he took out the pizza he had ordered in the afternoon from the fridge, heated it in the microwave, and ate it with relish. However, as he ate, he felt really wronged. For the first time in his life, the little lad's tears overflowed and flowed down his cheeks. Initially, he wanted to wipe them away, but the more he rubbed them, the more he could not hold back his tears. He had always been strong and brave since he was young. He rarely shed tears. Even when he went to the hospital for an injection, which of the other children didn't cry their eyes out? Only he sat there, bravely stretching out his arm. His brows were tightly knitted, his face was calm, and his eyelids didn't even blink. Unless it was under certain circumstances, when he was acting coquettishly in front of his mommy, tears were always part of his act. That was just a small trick she used to act coquettishly. However, this was the first time she had shed tears of grievance. For a long time, no matter how late it was, mommy would always come back to have dinner with him. No matter how busy she was at work, even if she had to work overtime until late at night, she would ask the manager for an hour off to have dinner with him before going back to work. But tonight, mommy stood him up and didn't even call him. Naturally, he felt very wronged. Therefore, the more he thought about it, the more his heart ached, and the tears fell down his cheeks. He reached out his hand and wiped them away fiercely. He took the phone and glanced at it. It was already 8:00 in the evening, and she still hadn't returned. He couldn't suppress the grievance he felt. He pouted and hugged the pillow on the sofa, crying. Boo-hoo. Mommy doesn't want you anymore. Why wasn't mommy back yet? Could it be that she didn't want him anymore now that she had that man? Once the little lad thought of that man's provocative words, his face turned ashen. He hated him. Anyone who wanted to take mommy away from him was a big bad guy. Chapter 240. The little lad's face was full of resentment. If Li Hanlin were present, his eyes would surely pop out of their sockets from shock. His impression of Yun Tianyu was that he was colder and more mature than the average lad his age. Not to mention tears, he was always calm and collected, as if nothing could affect his emotions. Now, however, he was curled up in the corner of the sofa, letting his body sink in. His eyes were red and swollen from his tears. He had never been this weak, but because of her missing the appointment, he felt a faint sense of unease in his heart. He did not like such a cold and empty house. There was only the sound of the television in the spacious house, and there was no human touch at all. The room was dark. He turned on all the lights, but they could not hide the cold air in the room. Usually, when his mother was at home, she was always cheerful and cheerful. Even when she was tired, she would sit at the desk and watch him do arithmetic problems. He loved doing arithmetic problems. Although he could calculate the answers in his heart with just a glance, he always pretended to be ignorant in front of his mother. He even counted with his fingers one by one. With his mother by his side, no matter how many arithmetic problems there were, he would always do them with relish. But now, he was the only one at home. Even if he watched his favorite program, he felt that it was no longer interesting. Could it be that it would continue like this? Did that man really love his mommy? True love was not enough, though. That man still had his family, but he had nothing except for his mommy. He was willing to do anything if he did not snatch his mommy away. Just as the little lad was feeling melancholy, his phone suddenly rang. He practically bounced off the sofa with a look of anticipation on his face. He didn't even have time to put on his shoes as he ran to the table barefooted to pick up his phone. When he saw the screen, his face immediately darkened with disappointment. The name Li Hanlin kept flashing on the screen. He wiped his tears and hung up the phone. His voice was hoarse from crying earlier. He did not want to be laughed at by others, so he ran to the desk and gulped down a few mouthfuls of water. Only when his voice returned to normal did he return the call. Hello? President Yun, are you asleep? Yu said, not yet. What's the matter? His tone was concise and crisp, as if his pitiful and self-reproachful appearance just now was a completely different person. It's like this. About the information you requested. I've already found it for you. Yun Tianyu raised a brow, but his expression was a little complicated. Previously, he was curious about his background. When he was younger, he often asked about his father's whereabouts. Yun Shishir had always been secretive about his background. He thought that he had touched on his mommy's sore spot by asking about his daddy. He had always thought that he did not have a daddy and that his daddy had left him the moment he was born. He also thought that he didn't have a father. But as he slowly learned the truth about his biological father, Wuxia, he couldn't help but be curious. What kind of past did his mother have with this man? Thus, for some reason, he ordered Li Hanlin to investigate the matter. Chapter 241. However, Director Yun, if it's possible, it's better that you don't know about it. Li Hanlin's tone on the other end of the phone was strange and cautious. He had read through the information and couldn't bear to send it to him. The truth was too cruel. He wanted to hide it, but he couldn't explain it to little Munchkin. Sitting in front of his desk, Yu opened the fax and waited for the information to be sent over. Then, he turned on his computer and a window popped up on the bottom right corner. Popular starlet Huan Yu's higher-ups slept with her? If it were any other time, Yu would have ignored such gossip. However, today, he clicked on it. Talking about sleeping with her was a common occurrence in the entertainment industry. In this world of luxury, there were many ugly inside stories that were not known to the public. Often, many celebrities were glamorous on the surface and had the image of a pure and innocent girl, but in private, they hid extremely ugly faces. In this industry, there were many fatal temptations. If one wanted to make a name for himself in this industry full of talents, sleeping with her was a method that most female celebrities used. Although it was another one, it was rare for Huan Yu Entertainment's scandal to be exposed by the media. This was because Huan Yu Entertainment's artists rarely had such scandals. After all, Huan Yu Entertainment's artists had strong backing. Huan Yu Entertainment was a milestone in the entertainment industry. Looking at the current entertainment industry, even O Huang Entertainment, which was the leader of the film industry when Hong Kong movies were popular, was far from being comparable. What was more frightening was that Huan Yu Entertainment controlled the shares of the 8 most authoritative entertainment media, and its influence on public opinion was obvious. It was also because of this that Huan Yu Entertainment controlled most of the public opinion in the entertainment industry. Any negative public opinion towards Huan Yu Entertainment had always been suppressed by Huan Yu. Therefore, Huan Yu's scandal of sleeping with an actress was really puzzling. Logically speaking, if this female celebrity was really unlucky and was photographed, Huan Yu would privately buy the photo to protect her image. Now, the first to expose this scandal was Huan Yu Entertainment's top media company, Xingyu Media. Could it be that this popular starlet had offended some higher-ups in Huan Yu, so they wanted to teach her a lesson? Yu furrowed her brows as she skimmed through the news. The one who broke the scandal was one of Huan Yu Entertainment's most popular actresses, Tang Yu. Early in the morning, Phoenix Entertainment's front page reported the scandal of Tang Yu's overnight stay in a high-rise villa in Huan Yu. The evidence was conclusive. In the photo, Tang Yu appeared at the entrance of the villa and walked into the villa with the help of a servant. This executive was a member of the board of directors of Huan Yu Entertainment, Li Wenqing. Li Wenqing had always had a bad reputation in the circle. She was even mentioned in the same breath as He Ling. Using his identity as a shareholder, many female celebrities had connections with him. There were rumors that Li Wenqing had a strong taste in certain aspects. She liked to play tricks and do things that were exciting. She was not much better than He Ling Xiang. Chapter 242. It was said that the reason why there was such a big commotion this time was because Li Wenqing's first wife caught them red-handed. The commotion this time was not small. Other than the photos that were leaked, there were also secretly taken videos. Li Wenqing was so impatient that he didn't even close the curtains when he was doing it. It seemed that he wasn't afraid of being secretly photographed. He probably didn't expect that things would develop like this. This report also caused quite a big blunder. On the second day of Huanyu's annual cocktail party, all the major media outlets had prepared the headlines in advance. All the artists' studios had also stayed up late to prepare for today's headlines. However, early in the morning, Xingyu Media was the first to release a notice on the media outlets. They said that they had caught a young actress trying to climb up the social ladder by cheating and had gotten hold of some juicy news. As soon as the notice was released, many media outlets were dumbfounded. No way, the headline that they had painstakingly concocted had been caught off guard by a Cheng Yaojin who had jumped out halfway? At first, they thought that it was an old trick used by the investors to hype up a movie that was about to be released. They were all veterans of the Jianghu, so they were already used to this kind of method. However, they didn't expect that at 7:00 in the morning, once the news about Tang Yu and Li Wenqing's affair was released, it quickly became a hot topic. Seeing that Xingyu Media had taken the lead, all the media outlets couldn't sit still anymore. They all rushed out to dig deeper and more juicy news. Therefore, Tang Yu's old news quickly became the headlines of all the major media outlets. Tang Yu's dark history was dug out by the media from the dust of time, and it was repeated again and again. Before Tang Yu debuted, she was a social support and sat on the stage in a bar. In order to climb up the social ladder, Tang Yu slept with 2 assistant directors and several male leads. Tang Yu and Yang Mi were from the same school, but they were always scheming against each other to get more exposure. Tang Yu bullied a newcomer who just debuted. This time, Tang Yu wished that she could be dug up from head to toe. Her dark history that she couldn't bear to look back on was dug out one by one. The ones who were hurt the most were Tang Yu's loyal fans. On the screen, Tang Yu had always played the role of a naive and sweet girl. Her pure and beautiful image had attracted many otaku fans. However, when they saw the true face of their goddess, it was inevitable that they would be disillusioned. Therefore, her fans became her haters. Tang Yu's followers on Weibo dropped from 10 million to 5 million. Female celebrities who had a close relationship with Tang Yu, such as Yang Mi, began to release drafts to clear their relationship with Tang Yu. Now that Tang Yu was ruined, most of the celebrities who had a good relationship with her chose to protect themselves. In this entertainment circle, there were many people who took advantage of Tang Yu's notoriety to stir up a hot topic. There were many people who hit Tang Yu while he was down. It's not suitable for children. Yu mumbled and looked at the fax machine. Seeing that the documents had been sent over, she walked over and picked up the stack of documents. She glanced at them and her face stiffened. His hand that was holding the paper couldn't help but tremble. What? What are these? Could this be the truth he wanted? Li Hanlin's hesitant tone rang in her ears. So, this is the reason why he's worried? Just then, the doorbell rang loudly, pulling her out of her thoughts. Yu turned on the CCTV and saw Yun Yeqing's face, who was waiting outside. Chapter 243. Yu was at a loss for a moment before his face sank. Why are they here? If it were in the past, he would definitely put on an innocent and romantic front and call him Grandpa obediently. However, after seeing the documents earlier, he felt a sense of alienation when he saw his father's face. However, in the next moment, he suddenly thought of something and smiled strangely. It seems that this grandpa of his is here to ask for a favor, right? Yu? Is your mommy home? Yun Yeqing seemed a little uneasy. Come in and talk. He opened the door to let them in, but Yu's expression was extremely cold. From the moment he stepped through the door, Yun Yeqing and Li Qin carefully sized him up from head to toe. Yun Yeqing felt a little strange. This child is a little different from before. He could not pinpoint exactly what was different about him. He only felt that this child had suddenly become so cold. There was no smile on his face, and he looked at him coldly and indifferently. He was no longer as close as before. Yu acutely sensed his strange gaze and glanced back at him. His sharp eyes were so sharp that even the experienced Yun Yechen could not help but be intimidated by them. The look in his eyes was so sharp and sharp. It was not a look that a child of his age should have. Yu, what's wrong with you? Why is he suddenly so cold to me? He used to call me Grandpa affectionately before. What's the reason behind this? I really can't figure it out at the moment. Li Qin snorted. You have no conscience. You don't even call me elder. I don't know how your mommy taught you. Don't you know the rules? Is it up to you to ask how my mommy taught me? Yu retorted coldly. Li Qin could not react in time. She was so angry that her face froze. This child has changed. He has changed. He used to be so submissive when he saw her. Even though she did not like this child, he still called her Grandma warmly every time he saw her. Although she ignored him, this child did not forget his manners. Why was he not polite today and even knew how to talk back? Especially that face, it was extremely cold. With just a glance, it was as if the surrounding air was about to freeze into ice. With just one look, she felt a chill run down her spine. Revolt. I think you're really your mother's biological child. You're just as unruly as your mother. You're a little B***starred who doesn't know anything. Don't you know how to respect your elders? He had no respect for his seniors. Humph. Yu's patience ran out. Did you brush your teeth before going out? Huh? Li Qin didn't understand what he meant and was a little dumbfounded. He nonchalantly replied, "This is my house, so please be mindful of your behavior. Don't only know how embarrassing it is when I chase you out." Li Qin still wanted to say something. At the side, Yun Yechen could not take it anymore. Just shut up. Li Qin looked at him in surprise and saw him glaring at her. It turned out that the "shut up" was meant for her. However, looking at his sullen face, she did not say anything for the first time. This time, she was here for something important. Chapter 244. Li Qin found it hilarious. This child is only around 7 years old, yet he acts like an old man. He looks even more experienced than me. How does Yun Shishir educate her child? She tried to strike a conversation with him. What do you know? Wait for your mother to come back, we have something to discuss with her. Yu lifted his cold gaze and swept it across Li Qin. That menacing look in his eyes was like that of a leader who had been through a lot of bloodshed. He was mature and arrogant. Her heart involuntarily shrank. She was actually a little timid because of his gaze and kept her mouth shut. After thinking about it carefully, she felt that something was amiss. He was clearly such a young child, yet he had such a murderous look in his eyes. This was truly unbelievable. You don't have to beat around the bush with me. If it's about borrowing money, just get straight to the point. His cold and indifferent tone was mixed with a hint of command. Yun Yechen was stunned. He and Li Qin looked at each other in disbelief. Yun Yechen, in particular, could not hide his embarrassment. How did you know that I'm here to borrow money from your mother? If it's about borrowing money, then I won't see you out. Yu ignored his question and quickly asked him to leave. Yun Yechen was stunned for a moment. Li Qin was even more furious. It was rare for her to have a good talk with Yun Shishir, but she was met with a cold shoulder by this child. Yun Yechen said, You won't understand even if I tell you about this. Nana is in the hospital and is in a critical situation. Grandpa doesn't want to do this, but Grandpa has no other choice. I can only come to your mother to think of a solution. Early this morning, the hospital called to inform them that something had happened to Yun Na and that she was now in a ward. They rushed over, but when they saw the person lying on the hospital bed, they almost fainted from shock. Li Qin, in particular, was greatly agitated after witnessing Yun Na's face being disfigured. She kicked up a fuss in the hospital, shouting that she wanted to find the culprit who had harmed her daughter. Alas, the hospital did not know the cause and effect of this matter. The patient was sent to the hospital early in the morning. A mysterious man in a suit paid for all the medical expenses and left in a hurry. Yun Yecheng went to the doctor to ask about Yun Na's condition. The doctor bluntly said, "Your lady's face is ruined." There were more than 10 wounds on his face. Just the stitches alone required dozens of stitches. He was afraid that his face would not be able to see anyone in the future. However, the doctor suggested that it was not completely destroyed. If conditions permitted, she could prepare a few 100,000 yuan and find an authoritative beauty agency for plastic surgery. Perhaps she could restore her looks. A few 100,000 was easy to say, but how could the current Yun Yecheng have the ability to fork out so much money at once? While Li Qin was worrying, Yun Na slowly regained consciousness. After she regained her consciousness, she seemed to be more or less aware of the current situation of her face. She cried and threw a tantrum, saying that she didn't want to live if her face was disfigured. Yun Yecheng was heartbroken. How did this person end up like this for no reason? Which bastard was it that disfigured her daughter? How was his daughter going to live in the future? Chapter 245. The nurse rushed over and gave her a dose of tranquilizer. It was only after she fell asleep that Yun Yecheng thought of Yun Shishir. He wanted to discuss with her what to do now. However, how could you not see through their intentions? Now that Yun Na was facing the crisis of losing her looks, she naturally wanted to raise money for plastic surgery. This was especially so for Li Qin. She could not wait to squeeze his mommy dry before giving up. In the past, she used to call her a little b*****. Now that her biological daughter was in trouble, she shamelessly came to talk about being a family. He felt that it was hypocritical. In the past, he used to call her grandma, and Yun Yecheng grandpa, on account of his mommy. Now that the truth of what happened 6 years ago was out, he would no longer be sentimental. You, how can you speak to your grandpa like that? How can you be so rude at such a young age? Li Qin reprimanded him sternly. Grandpa? He. I won't admit that I have a grandpa. Yu played with the ring in his hand and said calmly, if he's my grandpa, he'll know how hard mommy has been all these years. And you, Li Qin? I used to call you grandma, but you ignored me. For the past 6 years, you didn't care about mommy and me. Why didn't you think that she's your daughter and I'm your grandson back then? Now that you're in trouble, it's too late for you to bring out your so-called familial love. Yun Yecheng's body stiffened. His face was livid. All these years, he had not fulfilled his responsibility as a father. He felt that he owed this daughter of his. However, Yu's attitude toward him was too different. He could not figure out what was going on. Li Qin was displeased and lost her patience. You can't say that. What did the Yun family not treat her well? Even if they neglected her, it's just a small conflict. Blood is thicker than water. No matter what, your grandpa is still your biological grandfather, isn't he? He. As if he had heard something funny, Yu suddenly sneered and said coldly, blood is thicker than water? Do you really think I don't know that mommy isn't your biological daughter? Yun Yecheng was stunned. How did he know? As for Yun Shishir's identity as an adopted daughter, no one had ever mentioned it to him. How could a child like him know about it? Could it be impossible? He knew his daughter Shishir very well. She had always treated him as her biological father. This daughter of hers had always been very filial. Sure. Since you already know that your mother isn't our biological daughter, shouldn't you be the one to repay the kindness of raising her? Li Qin tried her best, pointing at him and accusing him without holding back, as if she had forgotten that the person in front of her was merely a 6-year-old child. Repay? Yu suddenly got up from her seat and took out a thick stack of documents from the study room. She threw it at Yun Yecheng expressionlessly, her tone as cold as ice. My mommy helped the Yun family once 6 years ago. Li Qin, what do you take my mommy for? Even if you want to humiliate her, I, Yun Tianyu, won't allow it. Turning around, he sneered. At the same time, Mr. Yun, I kindly advise you and your wife to keep your mouths shut and not talk nonsense to my mommy. You're not to mention today's matter to anyone. Li Qin fumed. You, how can you say that, scram? Yu suddenly pointed at the door and coldly ordered, scram. Yun Yecheng turned around and left. Seeing this, Li Qin hurriedly followed after him. Yu's face was cold. Thinking of the price his mother had paid for the Yun family 6 years ago, her heart ached so much that she was about to suffocate. Her heart really hurt as if it were being pierced. Yu supported herself on the sofa and clutched her chest tightly with one hand. Suddenly, she found it difficult to breathe. Suffocation. It really felt like suffocation. Ha, 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 cold sweat seeped out of his forehead. Yu's body stiffly sat down on the sofa, and his breathing became more and more rapid. He clutched his chest, feeling as if something was blocking his heart. It was so stuffy and painful that he could hardly breathe. Ha, 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 Yu painfully curled into a ball on the sofa. Her fingers clutched her chest tightly and her eyebrows were contorted. Her whole face was pale and colorless from the pain. Bean-sized beads of cold sweat rolled down her face and dripped onto the sofa. Ha, ha, his phone suddenly rang. Yu looked in the direction of the ringtone. Clutching his chest, he forced himself to sit up on the sofa. Slowly, almost step by step, he moved his feet. Just as his feet touched the ground, his body swayed, and he fell from the sofa to the floor. Breathe. I can't breathe. He struggled to move to the table, but the ringtone was already cut off. With trembling hands, he picked up the phone and dialed a number. In less than 2 seconds, the call was connected and Li Hanlin's calm voice came through. Director Yun? Director. Li, save me, smack. Before he could finish his words, the phone fell to the floor. Yun Tianyu could no longer hold on. His face turned pale as he fell to the floor. The corner of his lips twitched, and he lost consciousness. Li Hanlin's anxious voice came through the phone. Yo. Yu? Yun Tianyu? Hang in there, I'm coming. Sitting in the car on the way back to the hospital, Yun Yecheng opened the document with trembling hands. He quietly browsed through it page by page. His face became increasingly solemn and gradually turned ashen. Li Qin, who was sitting at the side, trembled with fear. She wanted to poke her head out a few times, but due to the dim lighting in the car and her poor eyesight, she could not see clearly what it was. Thus, she asked, "Hubby, what exactly is this? Don't talk to me." Yun Yecheng suddenly interrupted her angrily. With a heavy frown, he leaned his head against the seat. Don't talk to me, Li Qin. Don't talk to me. Chapter 246. As the Aston Martin sped along, the shadows of the lush trees flashed by outside the window. The villa was located in the elegant Shanshui garden. There were towering mountains, small streams, and lush green forests. At a glance, it looked like a sea of greenery. The night breeze blew, stirring up the green waves. Under the moonlight, the scenery was enchanting. Alas, at this moment, Yun Shishir, who was sitting in the front passenger seat, looked ahead nervously. From the corner of her eye, she cautiously glanced at the tachometer. The needle was pointing at 4,500. She then looked at the speed of 180 kilometers per hour. Her heart was in her throat at once. Fast, fast. The high-performance sports car was like a runaway horse, roaring as it sped along the mountain road, as if it was going to tear apart the silent night. Even though she didn't understand sports cars and didn't know what a 4,500 speed meant, she didn't feel much at first. However, at that speed, she could feel how scary it was when it was cornering. At that moment, she felt as if the car would float in the next second if it went any faster. When they left the villa, they had to go through a long mountain road. There was only a railing on the side of the road, and below the railing was a cliff. If they hit the railing, the consequences would be unimaginable. Even though the railing looked sturdy, it would be weak under the impact of the sports car. It was as if it didn't exist and existed in name only. If the car lost control, not to mention the railing, even the surrounding walls would collapse. She could even imagine that if the car lost control, it would crash through the railing and crash into the cliff, just like in American blockbusters. With a loud explosion, the car would really be destroyed and the people inside would die. Wuxia, it's too fast. Xianxia said to the man anxiously as she clutched her thumping heart. She looked at him, but at that moment, the man was supporting his head with one hand and looking ahead indifferently. He seemed to be indifferent. The scenery outside the window flashed by. Under the moonlight, his handsome face didn't have any fluctuations in expression. He only had one hand on the steering wheel, looking calm and at ease, as if he was handling everything with ease. Wuxia. Just as she finished speaking, the man glanced at her from the corner of his eye and smiled playfully. Suddenly, he stepped on the accelerator and the engine let out an ambitious roar as it sped up. What she didn't know was that to him, let alone 180 yards, even 200 yards was completely within his control. There was a curve in front of them. On the left was a mountain wall filled with strange rocks, while on the right was a bottomless cliff. On the mountain road, the streamlined sports car made a beautiful and smooth turn. Under the moonlight, the bright silver body of the car outlined a dazzling silver line. Xianxia was so frightened that she cried out involuntarily. Her face suddenly broke out in a thick layer of cold sweat. She was so scared that there was not a trace of blood on her face. Did this man do it on purpose? When the car slowly drove into Xianxia's residence, her face was already pale. The car was parked downstairs and the engine was turned off. Wuxia unbuckled his seatbelt and leaned closer to her, his voice full of ridicule. What? Are you scared stiff? As he spoke, he stretched out his slender fingers and gently flicked her cold cheeks in a somewhat naughty manner. Xianxia came back to her senses and looked over. She glared at him fiercely and asked suspiciously, Wuxia, did you do it on purpose? Chapter 247. On purpose? What do you mean on purpose? He asked while knowing the answer. His lips curled into a wicked arc. Although his tone was innocent, his eyes revealed a satisfied smile. He felt that her frightened appearance was quite cute. Some women not only had beautiful facial features, but their eyes were even more seductive and charming. Even if she was angrily glaring at you, you would still have the illusion that she was acting coquettishly and seducing you. It was extremely charming. His pupils slightly congealed, as if he had been bewitched by her delicate appearance, and he couldn't help but reach out to touch her face with his fingertips. Xianxia coldly avoided him and slapped his hand away. She angrily said, "Why are you still pretending to be innocent? Why are you driving so fast? Don't you know that this is very dangerous?" Wuxia slightly knitted his brows and pretended to be wronged as he asked back, "It was clearly you who kept rushing me. I saw that you were in a rush, so I drove so fast." His mouth moved as he pushed all the blame onto her. The man looked at her with an innocent face. His tone and tone were natural, as if he was silently accusing her of being unreasonable. If anyone else saw this, especially his close subordinates, they would definitely be shocked by his expression at this moment. The president, who was always cold and indifferent, had his brows slightly knitted. His thin lips were slightly pursed and his face was filled with innocence. His pair of eyes hid a smile that couldn't be seen. They would definitely be shocked to the point of being dumbfounded. In their eyes, Wuxia was arrogant and cold. He didn't smile normally and his cold face seemed like it would never have any expression. He also wouldn't be affected by any emotions. His face was originally handsome, but he always had a cold expression that made it hard for people to get close to him. Other than the little young master, he wouldn't smile to anyone else. But now, he actually smiled to a woman. However, Yunshursher naturally didn't have any awareness. She also didn't feel that he was taking special care of her. She only felt that this man was quite evil. He actually joked about such a dangerous matter. "Isn't your speed a little too fast?" From the villa in the suburbs, through the continuous mountain roads, through the bustling city, from the manor to her house, the distance of more than 50 kilometers, he actually only used 20 minutes? One had to know. The traffic in the capital was extremely congested. Just driving in the city took 15 minutes, which was more than 30 kilometers of mountain roads. He only used 5 minutes. What kind of concept was this? The fastest train on the high-speed railway was only 493 kilometers per hour. Later, because of an accident, it had to be reduced to 300 kilometers per hour. At 400 kilometers per hour, her ears almost lost their ringing. Even until now, she still hadn't recovered from the ringing. Yunshursher didn't want to talk to him. She pushed the car door open and she almost tripped. She was secretly annoyed. She hated herself for not being able to live up to her expectations. She was actually frightened by his driving skills to the point that her legs went soft. But this couldn't blame her. She was in that moment. Did this man's driving skills have to be so terrifying? She raised her wrist to look at her watch. It was already very late. You should be asleep, right? Chapter 248. Yu did not have a father by her side since she was young, so she vowed to work hard to make up for this. After she started working, no matter how busy she was or how late she had to work overtime, she would always make time for dinner. Even if she had to take leave, she would rush home to have dinner with him before rushing back to the office to continue working overtime. Even though this behavior had caused a lot of dissatisfaction, she had never made an exception. Unless there was something special, she would also take leave from him in advance. Even if the little guy would protest and express his dissatisfaction, he would at most tell her to eat on time and go home early over the phone. However, it was rare for her to not return home at night. Last time was the first time. Last night was the second time. Today was the third time. For 2 consecutive days, she did not have dinner with him. Yunshursher was very vexed. She raised her head and looked at the window of her house. The lights were still on. Her heart warmed, but at the same time, it ached slightly. This little guy, did he deliberately turn on the lights and wait for her to go home? Yunshursher was about to go upstairs when the man behind her called out to her. "Are you leaving just like that?" Wuxia saw that she intended to go upstairs without him, and a trace of dissatisfaction appeared on his face. "What else do you want?" Yunshursher turned to glare at him. "Don't you have anything to say?" Wuxia looked at her. Under the moonlight, his deep-set eyes shone slightly. "I want to go home." Yunshursher turned around and swiped the door open. What he got in response was the heavy sound of the door closing in the corridor. Wuxia sat in the car and could not help but smile. He raised his eyes slightly and looked at the only window on the 10th floor that was still lit. A trace of contemplation flashed across his eyes. "Yunshursher is my, Yuntianyo's, mommy. She is the woman I will protect for the rest of my life. I won't allow you to let her suffer any grievances, let alone make her sad." The young yet mature voice of a child echoed in her ears. Immature and mature were 2 contradictory words, but they were perfectly reflected in little Munchkin. What was immature was his voice, his appearance, and his still delicate and thin body. He was clearly only 6 years old, but his face was still childish and his voice was full of childishness. What was mature was her arrogant boldness, her steady tone, and her calm words. He was unable to understand why such a mature soul was hidden in such a petite body. He was so mature that it surprised him. He got out of the car, took out a cigarette box, and lit it in his mouth. Accompanied by a glimmer of sparks, the unique smell of cigarettes drifted in the evening breeze. Unspoken opened the door and was welcomed by the warm light from the living room. A smile involuntarily appeared on her face as she walked into the living room and said guiltily, Mommy is back. There was no response for a long time after she said this. If it were in the past, there would be hurried footsteps from the study. Yu would appear at the entrance with a bright smile on his face. He would jump into her arms and rub his tender little face against her like a spoiled little mommy. Now, it was so quiet that it was almost strange. Asleep? She walked into the study with confusion in her heart. The computer screen and fax machine were on, but the little guy was nowhere to be seen. Chapter 249. Unspoken exclaimed in surprise and walked into the bedroom. She even crept under the bed to take a look. Was he playing hide-and-seek with her to scare her as a punishment for not returning home for 2 days? Alas, he was nowhere to be found. She was suddenly worried. She hurried to the balcony and fearfully held onto the railing as she looked down. Her heart only calmed down when she saw that there was nothing out of the ordinary. Her phone had been smashed, so it was inevitable that she would be worried. She could not find the little lad anywhere. The house was only so big. There were 2 bedrooms and a living room, and the layout was about 60 square meters. She searched every corner of the house. There was no one in the house, though. Unspoken was extremely worried. She returned to the living room and saw the phone on the floor at the corner of the table. She walked over to pick it up and realized that the phone had been replaced with a smartphone. She was feeling perplexed when she saw a note left on the table. She picked it up and saw a phone number left on it. Unspoken had an ominous feeling. She picked up Yu's phone and dialed the number with trembling fingers. Li Hanlin's steady yet anxious voice came from the other end. Are you Yu's mommy? Since it was Yu's phone, there was a caller ID. I am. You are? I'm Director Yun, cough. Li Hanlin paused for a moment before continuing. I'm the principal of this kindergarten, Madam Yun. We've met before. Hello, Principal Li, may I ask, are you? Unspoken did not know what was going on, but she heard Li Hanlin say in a heavy tone, Madam Yun Tianyu has always been in poor health. Does he have a congenital heart deficiency? Unspoken seemed to have expected something when she heard his words. Her heart clenched and her voice trembled uncontrollably. Yes. Principal, what happened to Yu? When I got home, I didn't see him at home. There was a note for you on the table. He's in the hospital now. Not long ago, he called me and said that he was feeling unwell. I rushed over and sent him to the hospital. Li Hanlin paused, then suddenly said seriously, Madam Yun, I have to criticize you. As a parent, as a mother, how can you leave your child alone at home? Although Yun Tianyu is usually very obedient and mature, he is still only a 6-year-old child. He is still so young, can you be at ease leaving him alone at home? Children were naturally ignorant and lacked common sense about safety. This time, it was a relapse, but what about the next time? Many parents left their children at home out of negligence. Their children were playful and accidentally fell off the balcony and got seriously injured. The media leaked that they were poisoned. Were there any lack of such tragedies? You should reflect on yourself. Unspoken was worried sick. When she heard Li Hanlin's reproachful tone, her eyes welled up with tears. She also blamed herself immensely. Yes, Yu was only 6 years old. How could she leave him alone at home? His health was not good to begin with, so she should take good care of him. However, she was so irresponsible. Not only did she leave him at home for a day and a night, but she did not even fulfill the most basic responsibility of a mother when the child was hospitalized because of his illness. What cocktail party? She should not have attended it. What alcohol? She clearly knew her alcohol tolerance, so why did she have to be so stubborn? She should not have drunk. Not to mention a glass, she should not have even taken a sip. Chapter 250. She covered her mouth and asked anxiously with reddened eyes, "I'm sorry, Principal. It's all my fault. Where's Yu? Which hospital is he at? I'll be there right away." "Okay. I'm at Public Hospital number 1. Hurry over. Yu's condition isn't looking good. He has respiratory problems and hasn't woken up yet. Anyway, be careful on the road. I'll take good care of him." Before he could finish, Xianxia hurriedly picked up her bag, locked the door, and rushed downstairs. Downstairs, Wuxia was about to start the car when he saw Xianxia rushing out of the car through the rear-view mirror. She looked flustered as she ran towards the main entrance. With a strange feeling in his heart, he pressed the horn twice. Honk, honk. The car's horn was exceptionally loud and immediately attracted Xianxia's attention. Seeing that it was his car, she rushed over without a care. The moment the car door opened, she said anxiously, "Wuxia, send me to Public Hospital number 1. "Why are you going to the hospital?" Wuxia asked curiously. Xianxia's shoulders were trembling. She clutched her bag tightly and her face was filled with self-blame and anxiety. She looked so flustered that she looked like she was about to be defeated. "Yu is at the hospital. I have to rush over immediately." Right away, right away." Wuxia heard this and furrowed his brows slightly. However, he didn't ask further and leaned over. She thought that he was going to do something and wanted to stop him. However, he merely leaned over and buckled her seatbelt. "Don't be afraid. I'm here," he said softly and started the car. He stepped on the accelerator and the car sped out of the main entrance. Xianxia looked at the man's side profile in shock. However, she saw that his handsome face was cold and tense. His expression was calm and there was no trace of a smile in his eyes. However, he wasn't flustered either as he looked straight ahead. Although she was anxious at this moment, she didn't know why, but she didn't panic like before. The words, "Don't be afraid, I'm here," seemed to brush away the uneasiness and fear in her heart. However, when she thought of Yu's painful appearance when he was young, her heart clenched tightly again. At this moment, in the hospital ward, Li Hanlin sat on a small stool at the head of the bed and put down his phone. On the hospital bed, Yu, who he said was not awake yet and not in a good condition, was sitting quietly on the bed with a newspaper in her hands. Seeing that he had hung up on fairy tale, she put down the newspaper and crossed her arms. She leaned against the headboard and looked at him with a serious expression. She blinked her big black eyes and saw that he had put down his phone. She quickly asked, "What did you say?" He hung up. "He's probably on his way here." Li Hanlin asked again, "CEO Yun, what did I say just now?" "There's no problem ahead. Didn't you tell her to be careful on the road?" Yun Tianyu reprimanded. "What if Mommy was in a panic and met with danger on the way here?" Li Hanlin's face fell with grievance. "I did, but I was afraid that she didn't hear me, so I called back, but no one picked up." Yun Tianyu crossed his arms and nodded solemnly. He calmly listed out rows of formulas in his mind. It was a 30-kilometer journey from the apartment to the public hospital. The subway was at the entrance and the bus stop was a few dozen meters away. There was no need to transfer. The last train was at 9 p.m. She couldn't make it. The bus was too slow, so Mommy must have chosen to take a taxi. It would take about 45 minutes. Chapter 251. Li Hanlin's eyes twitched. This child, he was so scheming. He was exasperated. Earlier, he had received a call from Little Munchkin and heard Little Munchkin's painful cries for help. He immediately put down everything he was doing and rushed over. When he opened the door, he saw Little Munchkin lying on the ground. He immediately rushed over and carried him up. Seeing that Little Munchkin had fainted, he didn't know what was going on. He pinched little Munchkin's philtrum and was about to give him mouth-to-mouth resuscitation when little Munchkin opened his eyes. As soon as he woke up, he slapped his face to the side. Disgusting. Just as Li Hanlin was feeling extremely wronged, he saw the little boy leaning weakly in his arms. His breathing was rapid and his face was flushed red. He quickly asked what was going on. He immediately pointed to the medicine box on the cabinet and said, Bring it over." Li Hanlin immediately brought the medicine box over. The little boy struggled to find the medicine bottle and took a pill. However, his symptoms did not improve. He hurriedly sent him to the public hospital. After emergency treatment, his condition was finally alleviated. However, his following request left him dumbfounded. "Later, if my mommy calls you, please make my condition sound more serious." Li Hanlin's eyes widened when he heard this. "President Yun, don't you love your mommy the most? Aren't you afraid that she will be worried? Shouldn't she be worried about me?" Yu retorted unhappily. He was speechless. Li Hanlin pondered for a long time. It seemed that his words made sense. She left me alone at home for a day and a night. Shouldn't she blame herself and reflect on herself? Yes, so, just once will be enough. Let her love me more. As Yu spoke, he lowered his head and gripped the corner of the blanket tightly. His furrowed brows made his back view look helpless. Only when one has lost something will they know how to cherish it. However, once you lose it, you can never get it back. That was how the phone call came to be. He had always doted on his mommy, no matter how big or small the matter was. As long as she could take care of herself, he would never ask too much of this stupid mommy. He only asked her to take care of herself so that he would be at ease. However, he realized that sometimes, he would rather be a little more vulnerable and rely on her a little more. Only then would mommy's thoughts be more focused on him. "Oh," Yu nodded and frowned. "I don't think it's serious enough." "What's not good?" "You shouldn't say that." He was silent for a moment, his eyes cold. Suddenly, he said, "You should say that I almost died." Yun Tianyo's sinister smile sent a chill down Li Hanlin's spine. This child was truly unfathomable. Was he really only 6 years old? However, his words were not an exaggeration. If he had not arrived in time, Yun Tianyo's condition would have worsened, and it would have been very dangerous. Li Hanlin understood that the reason why he had asked him to say this was just a means. A child's world was extremely simple. They did not know how to beat around the bush or how to use tricks. Although Yun Tianyu was considered outstanding among the children, his outstanding EQ and IQ were unattainable by the other children. However, deep down, he was also incomparably simple. He only knew that if he appeared a little more vulnerable and pitiful, his mommy would show more love and care for him. Yun Tianyu slowly lay down and said in a low voice, "I can't lose to that man. I must get mommy's heart back." Chapter 252. The car stopped at the entrance of the hospital. Yun Shishir hurriedly alighted from the car and jogged toward the inpatient department. Mu Yaja parked the car and quickly chased after her. When she entered the inpatient department, she quickly took out her phone to call Li Hanlin, only to realize that her phone was out of battery. Yun Shishir bit her lower lip in frustration. She had been careless and did not bring the note with the number with her. She did not even know which floor and ward Yu was in, so she could only bite the bullet and walk toward the nurse's desk. She was halfway there when someone called out to her from behind. "Yun Shishir. You're here." Yun Shishir turned around in surprise and saw Li Qin, who was standing behind her, looking at her in surprise. Her face stiffened and she was a little surprised. Why was she here? Yun Shishir asked curiously, "Why are you here?" "The child is in the hospital. I just rushed over." "Have you heard about this, too?" For some reason, Li Qin's tone toward her was very polite. She was no longer as sarcastic as before. With a smile on her face, her tone was very gentle. Li Qin was not like this in the past. Whenever she saw her, she would look mean and speak with a sharp tone. She could not get used to the stark contrast now. The child was injured? Yu? Could it be that Principal Li contacted her father and the rest to inform them to pay the hospital fees? That should be it. When Yun Tianyou's illness flared up, the principal did not contact her when he sent the child to the hospital. He should have contacted Yun Yecheng immediately. She remembered that, just in case, she had filled in Yun Yecheng's emergency contact number in the school's contact book. Principal Li was not related to her family in any way. When the child was injured, he rushed to the hospital immediately. They were already very grateful. How could they expect him to pay the hospital fees for free? Principal Li must have contacted Yun Yecheng. When he learned that something had happened to Yu, he rushed over and paid the hospital fees for the child. However, Li Qin's attitude made her feel strange. In the past, she had always been annoyed with Yun Tianyu. Why now? Did you also just rush over? Yun Shishir asked. Yes, your dad is here too, but he just went to pay the bill. She didn't have much money on her, but she needed money to treat her child's illness. She could only save whatever money she had on her. If it's not enough, we'll think of another way. As Li Qin spoke, her face was filled with sorrow. She and Yun Yecheng had taken out all the savings they had in the bank, but even then, they only had 10,000 yuan in their bank account. Although someone had already paid for Yun Na's medical bills, the doctor said that the money was not enough for further treatment. He wanted them to pay another 20,000 yuan. But where did he get so much money? When Yun Yecheng found out that she had forced Yun Shishir to be a surrogate, he flew into a rage and threatened to divorce her. Divorce? How could this be? What would she do if they got divorced? Where's Yun Na? At this critical juncture, Li Qin was terrified. Divorce? How could this be? In her heart, she knew that her husband was down and out. He was a pauper with no money and could not give her a luxurious life. However, if he were to divorce her now, what should she do? She was used to living the life of a rich lady. She did not have to worry about food and clothing and did not have to do household chores. Even when the Yun family was in dire straits, she rarely did any housework. Most of it was done by Yun Shishir and Yun Yecheng. Chapter 253. Even if they were to get a divorce, it could not be now. Now that Yun Na was in such a predicament, she was still counting on Yun Yecheng to find a way to raise money for her to undergo plastic surgery. It would not be too late to kick him out then, but it could not be now. Besides, she was still counting on Yun Shishir to bear some of the medical bills for them. Hence, when she saw her, her face was full of flattery. Li Qin also thought that Yun Shishir had rushed over to visit after hearing about this matter from Yun Tianyu. She only hoped that the latter would be magnanimous and pay for Yun Na's plastic surgery fees. Yun Shishir, on the other hand, clearly misunderstood. She thought that Li Qin had rushed over to visit Yu out of goodwill and paid for his hospitalization fees. She could not help but sigh inwardly. Sigh. This child is so pitiful. Her voice is hoarse from crying. My heart aches to see her like this. The doctor asked for 20,000 yuan, but your father and I only managed to scrape together less than 10,000 yuan after half a day of hard work. This is a time of worry. Don't worry, I brought the money. Which ward is he in? Yun Shishir asked anxiously when she thought of Yu. You brought the money? That's great. Li Qin immediately pulled her hand and led her into the elevator. When the elevator reached the 8th floor, Li Qin hurriedly led her to ward 5020. Yun Shishir was also anxious, but when she walked into the ward and saw the person lying on the bed with a bandage on her face, her expression froze. It was just that, at this moment, the person was half awake and half asleep. Lying on the bed, there was no reaction. What's going on? She asked immediately. She thought that Li Qin had rushed over because she knew that Yu was sick. Sigh. I don't know what's going on, either. It would have been better if she did not mention it, but the moment she asked, Li Qin immediately burst into tears. I received a call early this morning saying that something happened to Nana. Your father and I rushed to the hospital and saw her like this. Your father's heart ached so much that he cried behind my back. Yun Shishir's expression became more and more unsightly. She looked at Yun Na on the hospital bed with a complicated expression. Li Qin was still crying at the side and said, the doctor said that this child's face was cut several times and had to be stitched up with dozens of stitches. It seemed like it was cut by a blade. Some of the wounds were shallow, while others were very deep. There were several slashes. Wasn't this a deliberate attempt to harm others? The doctor said that the child's face was ruined. However, if they could gather enough money, they could go to a beauty clinic for plastic surgery. Perhaps they could recover their looks. Shishir, can you think of something? Yun Shishir was stunned, but her heart turned cold. She thought that Li Qin had some kind intentions. Yes. When she was young, she had a high fever and was hospitalized with pneumonia, but Li Qin had never once visited her. How much would she care about Yu when he was sick? Think of something. It's like this. Li Qin pulled her to the side. Her face was polite, and her tone was rare and gentle. Nana's face is disfigured, but the doctor said that if we could gather $500,000, we could get plastic surgery to recover her looks. You know that Nana has always been very vain. When she woke up and found out that she was disfigured, she tried to kill herself. Your father's heart ached and he blamed himself. Can you think of a way to gather $500,000? 500,000? Where do I get $500,000? Yun Shishir interrupted her. Her face turned even colder. Chapter 254. It was no wonder that Li Qin no longer mocked and ridiculed her when she saw her. It turned out that she was hoping that she would raise money for her daughter's plastic surgery. Even though she didn't know what had happened to Yun Na that caused her face to be slashed dozens of times for no reason, didn't she go straight home after leaving the cocktail party yesterday? But so what? Whether or not she was disfigured, whether or not she could be saved, to put it bluntly, even if she died, it had nothing to do with her. Li Qin usually called her a little b** tch, but once she realized that she still had some value, she would stick to her. Was she trying to squeeze every last bit of value out of her? She wouldn't be foolish again. Sure. Li Qin saw that her attitude was cold, and her face turned stiff. She was about to flare up, but when she remembered that all her hopes were pinned on her, she could only swallow her anger and say calmly, "You can't be so heartless. Could it be that you're so heartless as to watch your own sister commit suicide?" What do you mean by that? Yun Shishir smiled mockingly. I didn't cause her to be like this. Are you trying to push the blame to me? That's not what I meant. How can you criticize me like that? Li Qin was also anxious. Moreover, I didn't ask for too much. The doctor said it's 500,000. It's only 500,000. To you, it should be a small amount, right? 500,000? You just said a few words, and I have to give you so much money? Yun Shishir suppressed the anger in her heart. I don't have it. You have it. Li Qin raised her voice. Why don't you have it? A few days ago, I saw you carrying an Armani handbag. That brand easily costs hundreds of thousands, and the more expensive ones are in the millions. You're telling me that you don't have money? Are you really so heartless as to leave her in the lurch? I was. Yun Shishir frowned. When she heard Li Qin mention the gown, she felt gloomy. She wanted to explain, but on second thought, there was no point in saying so much to her. Hence, she rejected her with one sentence. I don't have money. You're so heartless. In any case, you should at least consider your father's kindness in raising you. Now that your sister is in such a miserable state, can't you do some good and think of a way to save her? Li Qin said bitterly. Suddenly, she said, to be able to afford such expensive clothes, you must have a big boss supporting you outside. As soon as he finished speaking, Unshirshi's face immediately turned pale. She actually said such unpleasant words with such a relaxed expression. There was more than one bed in this ward. The family members of the other patients were also present. They all looked at her curiously. Li Qin's words were straightforward, but her meaning was shallow. She was simply saying that since she could afford to wear Armani, she must have a sugar daddy outside. But with so many people present, she didn't care at all. For a moment, everyone in the ward, including the patients and their family members, stared at her with colored glasses. From time to time, they would point at her, shake their heads, and sigh. When they saw Unshirshi walk into the ward, they were amazed. This girl was really fresh and beautiful. But they didn't expect that such a beautiful girl was actually a kept mistress. As a result, those gazes that were either filled with amazement or admiration turned into contempt and disdain. Chapter 255. Although she never cared about how others looked at her. What she hated was why Li Qin was always so harsh with her words. I didn't. Li Qin scolded, you didn't? Don't try to hide it from me. The neighbors told me that you left in a Bentley that day. Don't tell me that you bought the car yourself. Unshirshi was shocked. On the day of the cocktail party, Gu Xingzi did drive a Bentley when he came to pick her up. The Bentley drove into the neighborhood. At that time, all the neighbors saw her get in the car, but they didn't know that she got in the car to attend a cocktail party. They only thought that she had a man outside, and with that kind of dirty identity. Often, outsiders only saw your glamorous appearance. Out of jealousy and envy, they would make malicious speculations about you and point fingers at you. Hence, when this matter reached Li Qin's ears, she really thought that Unshirshi had an impressive sugar daddy and believed it without a doubt. But where did she get this sugar daddy from? Where was she going to get this 500,000 yuan? When Li Qin asked for money, it was just a simple matter of words. Did she have to hand over so much money to her? Otherwise, she would be unfilial. Unshirshi suddenly felt that she didn't even have the strength to explain. It seemed superfluous, so she just kept quiet. Li Qin saw that she didn't say anything and that she couldn't get anything right. Hence, she turned to the other family members on the hospital beds and muttered pitifully, "Hey, why didn't you say anything after I spoke for so long? Seriously. Was it a sin in my past life to have such a heartless daughter like you?" Unshirshi was expressionless. Her face was cold and ugly. The family members couldn't stand it anymore. They stood up and criticized Unshirshi with righteous indignation. "Young lady, this is your fault. We're all family. The more difficult it is, the more you should help each other, right? Moreover, she's your mother. Your mother is begging you, but you're indifferent and cold. I've never seen someone as unfilial as you. That's right, the one lying on the bed isn't just anyone, it's your sister. How can you be so heartless?" At the side, several patients lying on the hospital beds also complained. "Humph, if I had such a daughter, I would rather throw her away when she was born than raise her. When she grows up, won't she still cause trouble for me?" Unshirshi's shoulders trembled. Younger sister, yes, she was her younger sister. Ever since she was young, she had always doted on her. If Yunna liked clothes, even if she had to scrimp and save, she would still buy her a set of clothes with her pocket money. At that time, the iPhone was all the rage. It cost a few thousand yuan. She gritted her teeth and used the money she earned from her part-time job to buy it for her. Did she not treat her sister well? But what did this younger sister do to her? Seeing that someone had stood up for her, Li Qin appeared to be in the right. However, she looked aggrieved and helpless. You guys don't know. She's not my biological daughter. My husband and I adopted her. She's been estranged from me since she was young. Adopted? When everyone heard this, they were shocked. Then, everyone was furious. What an ingrate. I was wondering how can a biological daughter be so heartless. So, she's adopted? This is too much. You don't know how to be grateful at all. If your mother didn't adopt you, would you have the happy life you have today? Why don't you think about whose blessing it was that you were able to grow up to this age? Xianxia finally understood what it felt like to be unable to explain herself. At that moment, she was worried about Yu. She was anxious and turned to leave. Seeing that she was about to leave, Li Qin immediately walked up to her and grabbed her arm. Xianxia was annoyed and pushed her away. Li Qin fell to the ground, opened her throat, and started to cry. You're hitting me. I was just pulling your hand, stop pretending. Xianxia said angrily. Yu is in critical condition now. I don't have the time to care about your nonsense. After saying that, she turned to leave. However, she was blocked by a group of nosy family members at the door. Where do you think you're going? Unfilial daughter, how can there be someone as heartless as you? Are you hitting me? Chapter 256. One of the women's tone was especially harsh, as if she had already taken Li Qin's place. She was so angry that her face turned red. She spoke up for Li Qin. If it were me, I would definitely be angered to death by an unfilial daughter like you. That's right. Everyone says that daughters are considerate and are their mother's little jacket, but this is the first time I've seen someone as heartless as you. Xianxia clenched her teeth and held back the tears in her eyes. Suddenly, she raised her head and asked, Are you done? Her voice was not loud, but it was full of confidence with a hint of bone-chilling coldness. For a moment, the ward fell silent. Everyone stared at her, either angry or surprised. They did not understand and only thought that she was hopeless. However, they saw her take a deep breath and say to everyone, What right do you have to criticize me? Ah! Little girl, you're quite fierce, aren't you? Xianxia did not back down and said, Did I scold you or glare at you? You've been speculating about me from the beginning, haven't you? Everyone was speechless and fell silent. Xianxia said again, Do you know me? Do you know how I've been living for the past 20 years? Do you know what I've been through? Do you know what I've been through? You don't know anything, but you act like you do. This is our family matter. Who are you to butt in? We didn't say anything. We just think that a girl who's so young doesn't learn good things at such a young age and hooks up with rich businessmen outside. That's right. Shameless, breaking into other people's families and not learning good things. People like you are the scum of society. Li Qin said, Don't say any more. I've lost all my face. Sigh, adopted children are not as close as biological children. There's nothing we can do about it. It's one thing to be filial, but it's another thing to be immoral. She's such a young girl. Why did she have to learn to be a mistress? Xianxia stood alone in the whirlpool of public opinion. Among the crowd, her back view looked a little lonely. However, just as everyone was condemning her, a man's elegant voice interrupted them. Mistress? Everyone turned their heads and saw a slender, mature man leaning against the door with a cold expression. His face was as handsome as a god, but there was a faint displeasure written on it. When Xianxia saw him, she couldn't help but feel embarrassed. She lowered her head and looked embarrassed. Yunna also opened her eyes. In fact, she had been awake for a long time. She was just pretending to be asleep. She was in a depressed mood. The wound on her face was inflamed, swollen and painful. Now that Xianxia was unwilling to take out money to treat her face, she became even more angry. However, she was secretly pleased to hear that everyone was helping Li Qin to criticize Xianxia, despite not knowing the facts. A man's cold voice woke her up. When she opened her eyes, she saw Wuxia standing at the door. Muyaja. The CEO of Mu Group? Why was he here? When Li Qin saw him, she was petrified as if she had been struck by lightning. Yun Na did not recognize him. She had sharp eyes. She did not know who this man in front of her was, but she noticed that this man's facial features were similar to Yun Tianyo's. Although they were similar, it was more than that. That pair of eyes, that high nose bridge, and that good-looking thin lips were exactly the same. Chapter 257. Could he really be the child's biological father? Li Qin was stunned. She scrutinized the handsome man in front of her. Armani's handmade shirt, tailored slim-fit trousers, expensive leather shoes, and an expensive watch on his wrist. Unlike those nouveau riche, this man exuded the aura of a true aristocrat. With one look, one could tell that he was from a prestigious family and was either rich or respectable. Li Qin was so shocked that her eyeballs were about to pop out. She knew that Yun Tianyo's biological father was a rich man. Such a generous remuneration was not something an ordinary rich man could afford. However, she did not expect this employer to be so handsome. Moreover, he looked very young, about 25 or 26 years old. Could it be that he was not married yet? If that was the case, then she regretted it a little. If she had known earlier, then back then, would she not have let Yun Shishir off so easily? Li Qin clenched her fists as a flame of jealousy rose in her heart. Back then, Yun Yecheng had a pretentious relationship with the deputy director of a private hospital under Disheng Financial Group due to business reasons. Li Qin used this opportunity to learn from the deputy director that the Mu family was secretly looking for a surrogate mother. Although the conditions were harsh, the remuneration was very generous. Hence, she had an idea about Yun Shishir. At that time, Yun Shishir was only 18 years old. She was as beautiful as a lotus in clear water and was very outstanding. Hence, under repeated pressure, she brought Yun Shishir to sign the contract. She even gloated over her employer's misfortune, thinking that he would be an ugly and obese middle-aged man. She was overjoyed at the thought of the B***starred she hated the most being trampled on by a fierce-looking man. However, now that she saw it, it was undoubtedly a ruthless slap to her face. If only she had known earlier, she would have let Yun Na do it. Perhaps, if that child had worked harder, she would have become a phoenix and become the Mu family's young mistress. When that time came, she would not have to suffer and worry like this. Not only Li Qin, but everyone in the ward was stunned. They had never seen such a handsome man. His face, which seemed to have been cast by a knife, was cold. It was as if his entire body was emitting a golden light. His every movement could not hide his noble aura. Muyaja slowly walked in and walked behind the woman standing in front of the bed. He reached out and stroked Yun Shishir's hair. "Why didn't you wait for me?" He lowered his head, and there was a trace of tenderness in his eyes, as if the winter snow would melt. As a result, Yun Shishir's originally cold heart warmed up a little. The man's gentleness made her a little uncomfortable. I stopped the car just now, so I'm late." Yun Shishir said faintly, "It's fine. Did you suffer when I was not around?" After a pause, Muyaja raised his head and his expression darkened. "When I was at the door just now, I think I heard someone call you a mistress." He looked up and scanned the ward with his cold gaze. His gaze landed on the family members of the patients. His gaze was as sharp as a knife, and his voice was as cold as an icicle. "Who said that?" These three words were spoken slowly and carelessly, but between the lines, one could see that they were filled with displeasure. There was a biting cold air around him. It was as if anyone standing beside him would be stabbed by the sharpness of his aura. Chapter 258. Everyone looked at the man in disbelief, then looked at Li Qin. At this moment, they were a little confused. Didn't she say that her daughter had a sugar daddy? Could it be this man? Li Qin was even more shocked. The man's question silenced everyone. Who would dare to admit it? In front of Muyaja's powerful aura, everyone lost their earlier righteous indignation and lowered their heads awkwardly to do their own things. You. How are you related to Xianxia? Li Qin finally mustered up her courage to speak. Xianxia frowned in disgust. Our family? Why did Li Qin's attitude change so abruptly? Who is she? Wuxia glanced at Li Qin and lowered his head to ask. Xianxia obviously did not want to bother with Li Qin's unreasonable tantrum. When the man asked, she only replied, adoptive mother. Adoptive mother? The woman who forced her to sign the surrogacy agreement 6 years ago? Wuxia looked at her coldly. This woman's heart was truly vicious. If it were not for this agreement, what kind of crooked ideas would she have for Xianxia? Damn it! Li Qin was frightened by his cold gaze and took a step back. She was trembling. Why was this man's gaze so scary? It was like a knife, as if he wanted to carve a piece of flesh from her face. What's the matter? Xianxia glanced at Yun Na, who was lying on the hospital bed in a daze, and calmly explained, my sister met with an accident, and now, she needs a large sum of money for plastic surgery. Otherwise, her face will be ruined. She's asking me for money. I don't have it, and I can't pay for it. Wuxia asked, how much does it cost? Before Xianxia could speak, Li Qin immediately said, 1 million. 1 million? Xianxia's eyes were tinged with embarrassment. Didn't she just tell her that it was 500,000? Why was it 1 million now? 1 million? Didn't you say 500,000? Why is it 1 million now? Xianxia said angrily. Li Qin said awkwardly, Aya, you heard wrong. However, before Xianxia could refute, another patient's family member who was originally on Li Qin's side stood up and said, she didn't hear wrong. I also heard you say that it was 500,000 yuan. Now you've changed it to 1 million yuan. Big sis, it's better not to be too greedy. Li Qin said angrily, I don't know which bastard caused my Nana to become like this. Her face is ruined. The doctor said that she needs 1 million yuan to restore her face. As Yun Na's elder sister, Xianxia naturally had the responsibility to bear some responsibility. We're all family. Now that we're in trouble. Obligation? Xianxia clenched her fists. What obligation do I have? Was she a bloodsucker? Was he going to suck her blood to the very last drop? How could he be so greedy? 1 million, I have it. Wuxia said calmly behind her. His casual words caused everyone in the ward to widen their eyes in shock. 1 million, he could easily open his mouth. Who was this man? Could it be that he was a billionaire? Li Qin's eyes lit up. She almost blurted out, that's great. My Nana's face can be saved. Who exactly was this man? How could he be so rich? That's right. The remuneration on the contract alone was a few million yuan. After she gave birth to the child, the employer paid another considerable sum. Chapter 259. Li Qin smiled and asked, Xianxia, how should I address this gentleman? Why aren't you asking him to sit down? Wuxia watched her every move expressionlessly and did not make a move. He said that he had the money, but he did not say that he would fork out the money. Li Qin felt a little awkward and could only look at Xianxia. Xianxia, how should I address this gentleman? Mu. Chairman Mu. On the hospital bed, Yun Na spoke timidly, looking nervous. Li Qin's eyes widened. Nana, you know him? Yes. Mom, he's the CEO of Disheng Financial Group, Chairman Mu. Li Qin's face turned pale at the mention of this title. Wuxia, the CEO of Mu Financial Group? Everyone knew that the Mu family was the wealthiest family in the capital. Oh my God, this man was the CEO of Mu Group? Ah, Xianxia, why didn't you tell me about such a big matter? When did you and young Master Mu Anyone could tell that Li Qin was gnashing her teeth in hatred when she said this, but she still had to maintain a smile. Then, sure, you should pay more attention to your sister's matter. 1 million? That's a lot. I don't have that much. Xianxia rejected without hesitation. Suddenly, she added coldly, please get this straight. Even if I had the money, I wouldn't fork it out. Li Qin's face stiffened. She almost lost her temper when she heard her refusal. However, Wuxia was present. She could only suppress her anger and turn to him for help. Mr. Wuxia, you see, Nana is Xiaxia's sister. We're in a pinch now. What do you think about this 1 million? Wuxia did not even look at her. He lowered his head and asked Xianxia, what do you think? He was obviously asking for her opinion. There was no doubt about the doting look on his face. It was obvious that as long as Xianxia agreed, this 1 million was just a string of numbers to him. Li Qin looked at Xianxia expectantly, only to hear her say indifferently, you think of a way yourself. I can't help you. Why can't you help me? Li Qin was so anxious that her eyes were red. Isn't young Master Mu here? How rich is the Mu group? 1 million is nothing to young Master Mu, isn't it? Even Wuxia couldn't help but frown at his undisguised ambition. The other people in the ward sighed, as if they had seen through Li Qin's character. Greed, insatiable greed. Could it be that they had misunderstood the girl? For a moment, everyone felt extremely guilty. Xianxia flew into a rage out of humiliation at her words. What was this? Was she forcing her to beg with her? Li Qin cried out in agitation, Xianxia, are you really going to leave him to die? Do you want your father to kneel down and beg you? Xianxia was infuriated. Li Qin was using Yunyeqing to threaten her. I'm leaving him to die. Xianxia suddenly raised her chin and stared coldly into her eyes. She retorted word by word, she's your child, not mine. You're the one who taught her, not me. Why do I always have to clean up her mess? Yes, I was adopted by you, but am I your slave? Am I supposed to risk my life for you? How long are you going to use me? Isn't it enough? Haven't I been harmed by you enough? Li Qin was stunned. Everyone held their breaths. Chapter 260. Xianxia held her aching forehead and said solemnly, if I had such a daughter, I'd feel ashamed. You play the role of a loving mother in front of everyone, but have you ever truly cared about me? Even if I'm your biological daughter, you don't seem to care much about me. Do you know that she's gambling outside? Do you know that she's taking drugs outside? Yes, I'm her elder sister. That's why I'm always the one cleaning up after her mess. Have you ever cared? Have you ever asked? Her enemies came to my door to collect debts, and I lost my job. I even had to pay off her debts with my hard-earned savings. What else do you want? Mom, are you a vampire? Will you only stop when you suck my blood dry? Li Qin's face flushed red at her words. Wuxia was slightly startled. He could not help but recall the day when he bumped into her. She seemed to be carrying a box and looked as if she had been kicked out of the company. So that's the reason? I advise you, instead of going around begging for help when something happens, it's better for you to educate your daughter properly before this happens. Today, she's disfigured, but what about tomorrow? Trouble comes from the mouth. Why do I have to bear the consequences for her every time something happens? Why should I? After a pause, she continued, I don't have time to waste with you. Yu is still waiting for me. If you stop me again, I won't go easy on you. With that, Xianxia turned around and was about to leave when she bumped into Yunyeqing, who was standing at the same spot with the bill in his hand. Dad. Xianxia was stunned. She did not know how long he had been standing outside the door and how much of her words he had heard. Xianxia, is this true? He asked in a daze. She's taking drugs and gambling outside? Did you pay off her debts on her behalf? Yun-na trembled in fear at the sight of Yun Yecheng. D****, Yun Shishir. Why did she reveal all these? Isn't she trying to get me killed? Dad, don't ask any more. I don't want to talk about it. I've done a lot for this family, but they don't welcome me. If you don't welcome me, I'll just leave. Yun Shishir lowered her head and brushed past him. I'm sorry. Yu is sick. I'm not in the mood to talk about this. Is Yu sick? Yun Yecheng was shocked. Just as he was about to chase after Mu Yaja to clarify the matter, he saw the latter turn around and glare at him coldly. His sharp gaze caused him to stop in his tracks, not daring to step forward. Mr. Yun, I suggest that you clean up your household affairs first. If you don't deal with it, I don't mind intervening. The meaning behind his words was that if he were to make a move, then he would surely not let Li Qin and Yun Na have an easy time. After saying that, Mu Yaja followed behind Yun Shishir and disappeared around the corner of the corridor. Yun Yecheng walked into the ward in a daze. The moment he raised his head and saw Li Qin's uneasy face, his face darkened. Hubby, Pa, what she got in return was a slap that turned into anger out of humiliation. Li Qin covered her face, dumbfounded. She did not expect him to slap her. In her momentary daze, he gave her another slap. This time, he used more force, causing her to fall backward and hit the cabinet. Blood flowed from her head. Yun Yecheng did not care that there were other people in the ward. His anger made him lose his rationality. You disgrace. Don't you think things are messy enough? Are you a beggar? Are you asking for money from others? Why did I marry a wife like you? You're a disgrace to the Yun family. Yun Na was so frightened that she hid in the corner. Chapter 261. Yun Yecheng sat on the stool in a huff. He slammed the bedside table and glared at Yun Na. Let her go. Isn't she shameless? What's the use of caring about her looks when she's already so embarrassed? Not only is she disfigured, she doesn't even want her face and dignity anymore. She can't live like this anymore. He paused for a moment before saying in a pained voice, Li Qin, let's get a divorce. Take our daughter and leave. I can't afford to have a wife like you, nor can I afford to raise a daughter like you. There was an eerie silence in the ward. Everyone was stunned. Yun Na was so frightened that she covered her mouth with tears streaming down her face. Li Qin's face cracked when she heard the word divorce. Yu was lying on the bed reading a newspaper. His hearing had always been sharp. He seemed to have heard hurried footsteps coming from the corridor. He immediately threw the newspaper aside, lay back on the bed, and signaled to Li Hanlin with his eyes. Li Hanlin immediately got the hint. The little lad closed his eyes and pretended to be dead. He got up and walked to the door to open it, only to see Yun Shishir and Mu Yaja walking toward him. CEO. Mu? Li Hanlin's lips twitched. This wasn't how the script was supposed to go. Why was Mu Yaja here? When Yun Shishir saw him, she quickened her pace and walked to the door of the ward. She looked inside anxiously. The ward was a normal one, but under Li Hanlin's arrangement, there were no other patients. In the spacious ward, Yu lay quietly on the bed next to the wall. His little face was as pale as a sheet of white paper. His lips, in particular, were cracked and dry. His mother's heart ached so much that she felt like tearing it apart when she saw it. Yun Shishir asked worriedly, Principal, how are you? How is Yu? Li Hanlin pursed his lips and pretended to be worried and reproachful. Why are you only here now? I've never seen such an irresponsible mother like you. Yu's condition doesn't look too good. The doctor said that this isn't the first time he's had an attack like this. Yes, it's not the first time I've had a relapse, but it's the first time I've had a relapse in 2 years. Yun Shishir's heart clenched into a ball, and she couldn't help but tear up. Yu was her Achilles heel. When she thought about how Yu had to go through so much pain at such a young age, she wished she could take her child's place and bear this pain. Li Hanlin nodded, pretending to be serious. Yes. If she didn't take good care of her body, the chances of her relapse would only increase. At that time, her condition would worsen and she would have to undergo surgery. But the child is so young. I'm afraid that his body won't be able to take such a big operation. Thank you. Has he not woken up yet? Li Hanlin shook his head regretfully. Although his condition has stabilized, the little guy has not woken up yet. However, you don't have to worry. The doctor said that the condition is under control. It's not a big problem for now. Thank you. Unspoken thanked him and immediately walked towards the bed. Wuxia was about to enter the ward, but Li Hanlin stopped him at the right time. The latter looked at him with a displeased expression. His cold gaze seemed to be asking why Li Hanlin stopped him. Li Hanlin was shocked by his sharp gaze, but he immediately said, "You can't go in." Wuxia frowned slightly. He raised his hand and swatted Li Hanlin's arm away. Then, he slowly walked into the ward. Li Hanlin, who was standing at the door, was obviously shocked. Chapter 262. Unspoken sat on the edge of the bed anxiously. She looked at little Munchkin's pale face and gritted her teeth. Her heart felt like it was being stabbed by a knife. She reached out and caressed Yu's face, but all she felt was coldness. Unspoken frowned, her heart throbbing in pain. It was so cold, as if there was no warmth at all. Tears flowed out of her eyes uncontrollably. Her heart ached so much that she couldn't control herself. Yu. She called out his nickname softly, but her voice was as soft as a mosquito, for fear of waking him up. Wuxia stood behind Unspoken and looked at little Munchkin on the bed. His heart felt strangely suffocated at that moment. What kind of emotions would a man feel when he saw his biological son whom he had lost contact with for a full 6 years? He only felt that something was constantly surging in his heart. This kind of feeling was unfamiliar and warm, and it was difficult to describe with any words. It wasn't the first time he had realized that he was a father. Back then, when this woman gave birth to Xianxia for him, he, who had always been calm, actually made mistakes in the board meeting. After the meeting, he rushed to the Mu family's private hospital and took the infant from the nurse. It was so small, with a small head, a wrinkled face, and a pair of eyes that were tightly squinted. It was difficult for the infant's 2 small hands to hold his index finger. When he held the child in his arms, the crying child stopped crying in an instant. He waved his arms and hugged his hand. Then, he sucked on his finger out of instinct and started sucking on it. Wuxia was tickled by the child's interesting reaction, and his eyes were filled with joy. At that moment, he thought that he was dreaming. He was a father. He didn't have a happy marriage, he didn't have a beloved wife. He didn't even have the experience of waiting outside the delivery room anxiously like other men. It was as if a Xiao Bao had fallen from the sky. He had become a father, and he had a son. At that time, he swore to give this child a warm family. Even if this family didn't have a mother, he would be a good father. Wuxia's concept of a father was still that of his own father. But now that he had become a father, he felt somewhat at a loss, helpless, and complicated. It was his first time holding a child. He stared at Xianxia for a long time, as if trying to find traces of himself on the child's face. But the child was still so young and his face was wrinkled. Only when he was 1 month old could he vaguely see that the child's lips were very similar to his, thin and well-defined. When little Chen was a year old, even Grandpa Mu happily said that the child resembled him by 70 to 80%. Logically speaking, a son should be more like his mother, while a daughter should be more like her father. However, Xianxia was extremely similar to him. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that he was a carbon copy of him. Now, as he stood in the ward and looked at Yu, who was lying on the bed, his heart was filled with complex emotions. Compared to 6 years ago, when he carefully carried a crying little Chen in his arms, his feelings were even more complicated. When the pregnancy report came out that Xianxia was pregnant with identical twins, Grandpa Mu was very happy. However, the baby was born prematurely in August. He found out that his younger brother was not breathing when he was born and had died prematurely. He didn't even see the child with his own eyes, but he knew that the hospital had already taken care of the child's funeral. He was afraid that Grandpa Mu would be reminded of the past, so he didn't pursue the matter further. Chapter 263. Before he had met this child, especially when this child, whom he had never met before, had asked him to stay away from his mommy through the phone, he had only found it amusing and amusing. How capable could a child be? He had coldly warned him not to bully his mommy again, or else he would be irreconcilable with him. At that time, he had only admired this child. He was arrogant, courageous, and had inherited his bloodline of decisiveness. Even his tone was 100% similar to his. However, when he saw this child with his own eyes, his heart ached. This child and Xiao Yichen were twins. He could not help but sigh at the divine and miraculous nature of the Creator. Unlike other twins, this child's facial features and face were exactly the same. If the two of them wore the same clothes and stood next to each other without any expression, he would not even be able to tell who was who. However, upon closer inspection, there were some subtle differences. Xiao Yichen's eyes were more like his. They were deep and ethereal, with long and narrow eyes. His eyelashes were thick like the feathers of a phoenix, and his nose bridge was high and straight. The tip of his nose was upturned, forming an arrogant arc. However, the casual gentleness between his eyebrows reminded him of Xianxia. His small mouth, the outline of his face, and the color of his lips were like hers. Yu Yu's eyes, on the other hand, were a little more like hers. The black and white were distinct. His jet-black pupils were watery, as if they were hiding a beautiful starry night. They were like pitch-black and translucent agate stones. His nose bridge was high and straight like his, while his lips were pink and tender, moist, and glossy like hers. Xiao Yichen had always been well-developed, and his height had shot up very quickly. Although he was only 6 years old, when he stood next to him, he was as tall as his waist. His delicate face was rosy and healthy, and his cheeks were chubby with a little baby fat. He could not help but want to kiss them. On the other hand, Yu Yu was a little on the skinny side. Xianxia had always been very attentive when it came to nutrition, but perhaps the child did not absorb it well, for his height could keep up with his growth, but there was not much meat on his body. He was thin and small. Although he was about the same height as little Yichen, at a glance, his wrist was so thin that he could easily hold it with 2 fingers. Yu Yu, Xianxia called out to him. Yu Yu opened his eyes slightly. Seeing that he was awake, Xianxia was both surprised and happy. She hugged him and said sympathetically, "Yu Yu, you're awake. Mommy is late." I'm sorry. Yu Yu's delicate little face cringed slightly, and he pouted. His watery eyes were filled with tears of grievance. He rubbed against her arms longingly and grumbled, "Mommy, why are you only here now? Yu Yu has been waiting for you for a long time." Yu Yu thought that Mommy didn't want Yu Yu anymore. Sob. Yu Yu hugged Xianxia's neck with his little hands and rested his head on her shoulder in satisfaction. He rubbed against her like a kitten, greedily enjoying the warmth in her arms. However, when he suddenly opened his eyes and saw the man standing by the bed, his soft smile froze on his lips. Mu Yaja's footsteps were very light. He stood at the head of the bed for a long time and quietly sized him up without making a sound. However, when Yu Yu opened his eyes and saw the man by the bed, his face turned cold and gloomy with his back facing Xianxia. Chapter 264. It's him? Why is he here? He had thought that his mommy had come alone. Why did she bring this man along? Yu Yu's expression tensed up. His thin lips formed a stiff line as he felt displeased. This was the first time Yun Tianyu looked at this man up close. The first time he saw his biological father was in a financial magazine. Initially, he thought that the photo had been edited. Otherwise, how could there be such a perfect man in this world? He was handsome, mature, and had an extraordinary temperament. Especially that cold and resolute face. Even though it was a cold photo, people couldn't help but be intimidated by it. The last time he saw him was at a gala. He clearly saw this man's handsome features and tall figure. It turned out that this perfect man existed in reality, too. At this moment, the father and son were facing each other. He looked at the little lad, and the latter sized him up with an appraising gaze. His eyes gradually filled with disbelief. He was an outstanding man. He was also a domineering man. He should be like him, a very possessive man. An extremely powerful aura emanated from his body. Wherever he went, the aura emanating from his body would spread to every corner. This was his biological father. When he was young, he did not have a father. When he saw other children with fathers, he was envious and confused. Why was it that when other children were a family of 3, their left hand holding mommies and right hand holding daddies, his right hand was empty? He often saw other children sitting on their father's shoulders. Every time he saw this scene, he was envious. His father was such a tall figure. It was as if, with him by his side, he had nothing to fear in this world. If there was a man of indomitable spirit in the family, he and mommy would not be looked down upon by others, much less be bullied, right? However, as he grew older, he began to resent his father's image. Why did daddy not want him and mommy anymore? He had asked his mommy a few times, but she had always evaded the question and had never given him a proper answer. Gradually, he became indifferent to the concept of a father. If there was no man, he would become a man. He would protect his mommy at all costs and by hook or by crook. Perhaps, in Li Hanlin's eyes, Yun Tianyu's maturity was not something an ordinary child could compare to. What he did not know was that Yu Yu was only arming himself with his weak side and carefully hiding it. In front of Yun Shishir, he was a sensible, well-behaved, and extremely obedient boy. In front of Li Hanlin, he was black-bellied, steady, and extraordinarily charismatic. He did not need a father. He did not want to share his mommy's love with anyone else. At this thought, Yu Yu's little hands hugged his mommy's shoulders. This man was really taking over his mommy's life step by step. He couldn't just sit back and watch. Mommy, why haven't you come home for 2 days? There's only Yu Yu at home. Yu Yu is so scared. Yun Tianyu rested his small face on his mother's shoulder. His small lips opened and closed as he cried out in a trembling voice. His childish voice was hoarse and choked with sobs, making anyone who heard it feel heartache. Chapter 265. Yun Shishir was hugging Yun Tianyu, so she could not see the expression on his face. However, when she heard the little lad's tearful complaints, her heart broke. Sorry. Yu Yu, mommy is wrong. Mommy won't leave Yu Yu alone at home anymore. It's mommy's fault this time. Yu Yu, you can punish mommy however you want. Wuxia stood by the bed with furrowed brows. This little lad was young, but he was quite scheming. He even knew how to make use of his mommy's guilt toward him. Although he spoke coquettishly, he glared at him coldly. He could not help but marvel at his superb acting skills. Yun Tianyu raised a brow and threw a cold glance at Wuxia. He then softly said to Yun Shishir, "Stupid mommy, how can you bear to punish mommy? Mommy must have had something on last night, so she couldn't come back. Yu Yu doesn't blame mommy, but don't leave Yu Yu alone next time. Yu Yu is really scared." With that, his lips curled up slightly as if he was showing off to the man. He then coquettishly said, "Mommy, if I must punish you, then I'll punish you by making you accompany Yu Yu to bed every night and telling Yu Yu stories. Okay. Pinky promise, you can't go back on your words." Yu stretched out his pinky and hooked it. Xianxia gently wiped away the heartache in her eyes and hooked her pinky with his. Pinky promise. Yu's eyes curved gently. He rested his forehead on Xianxia's and rubbed it coquettishly. He pouted and said, "Mommy, Yu forgives you." Yu, good boy. Yu suddenly looked at Wuxia and pretended to be surprised. Mommy, who is this uncle? Xianxia's expression turned awkward. He didn't know that Yu already knew his identity. Now that little munchkin mentioned it, he didn't know what to do. How should he introduce them? Could it be that Yu, this is your daddy? Yu would be terrified. For 6 years, he had never mentioned anything about his biological father in front of the child. Now that he was suddenly told that he had a father, it was naturally difficult for him to accept. When she thought of this, her expression became extremely ugly. She subconsciously looked behind her and glanced at the man beside the bed. The latter was looking at her as if he was also waiting for her to explain. She sucked in a deep breath of cold air and could not help pursing her lips in distress. She really didn't know how to introduce him. Usually, her life was split between work and home, so she didn't have many friends. She had met a few of her friends, colleagues, and Yu. Although the child was young, he was very meticulous. While she was hesitating, Li Hanlin suddenly coughed lightly and secretly signaled Yu with his eyes. Wuxia turned to look at him. He immediately retracted his gaze and looked down. At the side, Xianxia suddenly reacted and explained with a smile, Yu, this is Mommy's university professor. His surname is Mu, and he took good care of Mommy when we were in school. She rarely lied, so she felt a little guilty. After Xianxia introduced him, she secretly looked at the man's expression. Wuxia still had a gentle smile on his face. He didn't deny it, nor did he reveal any other emotions. However, when he looked at her from the corner of his eyes, there was a hidden meaning in them that she couldn't fathom. Li Hanlin snickered at the side. Chapter 266. Yuntianyo's expression did not reveal any surprise, but his eyebrows twitched subtly. Li Hanlin snickered at the side. This mother-son pair was really something. The son lied to his mother that his personal assistant was the kindergarten principal, while the mother lied to her son that the child's biological father was a university professor. The father-son pair was really something. They knew each other's identity, and the only one who was kept in the dark was Xianxia. Xianxia would never have guessed that the little rascal would be unaware of Wuxia's identity. Did she really think that Yu was a 6-year-old child? Li Hanlin's lips twitched at the thought of this. Ahem. All right. Yu was indeed a 6-year-old child. Yu chuckled and greeted him gently, so, you're Mommy's university professor. You look really young, though. About 27 or 28. There was a gentle smile on her face, but her eyes were fixed on the man, and there was a faint taste of gnashing teeth. Wuxia chuckled. The little lad's eyes were really sharp. He could tell his age at a glance. Thus, he stretched out his slender hand and held the little fellow's little hand. The man's hand was broad and warm, fair and smooth, and his fingers were long and slender. The little lad's hand, however, was slightly cold. Although it was chubby, it was slightly pale. Due to Xianxia's presence, Yu could not shake off his hand. He could only put on a fake smile, feeling extremely awkward inside. Wuxia smiled and held his hand. He said lightly, "Little Yu, you can call me Uncle Mu." His voice was mellow and charming. Like aged wine, it was easy to get intoxicated. Xianxia was a little surprised. She did not expect this man to go along with her lie. His expression was so natural, as if he were really her university professor. Yu smiled unnaturally. "Uncle Mu, you must be very busy. Thank you so much for coming to see me so late. Mommy was taken care of by you in university. I must have caused you a lot of trouble, right? Wuxia raised his eyes and looked deeply at Yunshushi. He chuckled and said, "No. Your mommy is usually very obedient." For some reason, when he said this, there was a deeper meaning behind it. Yunshushi turned her face away unnaturally, and the corners of her lips were a little stiff. Just as they were exchanging pleasantries, someone knocked on the door respectfully. Shortly after, a man in a suit led a few of Yuntianyo's attending doctors in. Yunshushi was a little surprised. She recognized this man. This man in a suit was the director of this hospital, Meng Qingyang. But why was he here? While he was in doubt, he saw Meng Qingyang walk to Wuxia's side with a respectful and warm smile. He had just received news that the young master of the Mu family, the young CEO of the Mu group, had appeared in his hospital. He had rushed over immediately. Although he did not know why he was suddenly here, this was a big deal. One must know that even if the sky were to collapse, this distinguished person must not be neglected. Of course, he must be treated well. One must know that in the future, he still had to rely on this big shot. Chapter 267. Meng Qingyang was dumbfounded by his words. Student? Father? Meng Qingyang glanced at Yunshushi, who was standing at the side with a stupefied expression. He pondered for a moment, and although he did not quite understand what was going on, he knew how to judge the situation. Thus, he cooperated and said, "Hello, Mr. Mu." As he spoke, he sized up the beautiful woman standing at the side. For a moment, he could not figure out her identity. She looked quite obedient. Judging from her attire, she did not look like a student, but her appearance was still young and her face was unbelievably beautiful. As he thought of this, he hummed politely in agreement with his remark. "Is this Mr. Mu's student? One look and I can tell that she's a talented woman." Yunshushi exchanged pleasantries with an embarrassed look on her face. The corner of Li Hanlan's mouth twitched. Everyone in the room, be it old or young, male or female, was acting. Were they all good at acting? Wuxia surveyed the ward. Narrowing his eyes, he slowly said, "This ward seems a little shabby. It's not suitable for the patient to recuperate." As soon as his cold voice fell, Meng Qingyang broke out in a cold sweat. He smiled apologetically and nodded his head repeatedly. He then turned to reprimand the attending doctor. Indeed, this ward was too shabby, but it could not be helped. Li Hanlan originally wanted to arrange a VIP ward for Yuntianyu, but the latter was worried that his mother would be suspicious, so he arranged for the most ordinary ward. Thus, Li Hanlan paid for the ordinary ward. Meng Qingyang broke out in a cold sweat, and so did the attending doctor beside him. Before this, how could he have expected that the patient in this ward would be related to such a big shot? If he had known earlier, not to mention the ICU ward, even the only VIP ward in the inpatient department would be vacated for him. "Yes, I'll change this child's ward to the VIP ward right away." Yunshushi stared at them with her mouth agape. In her memory, this attending doctor was quite unreasonable and treated people coldly. In short, she did not have a good impression of him. However, when they saw the hospital director and several attending doctors beside him, who were usually serious in speech and manner, bowing in front of Wuxia, they could not help but secretly click their tongues. After exchanging some pleasantries, Meng Qingyang walked out of the ward. Meng Qingyang's eyebrows relaxed and his face relaxed. He secretly heaved a sigh of relief. After walking a little further, he turned around and asked Zhao Rui behind him, "Zhao Rui, let me ask you, who is the patient in that ward?" Background? Zhao Rui was confused. "Nothing special. He's just an ordinary patient. Take special care of him in the future. Vacate that intensive care unit and let him stay there. Send me the best specialist and nutritionist. There can't be the slightest bit of negligence." Then, he instructed meticulously, "If the patient has any requests, as long as they are not too demanding, try your best to satisfy them." "Why?" Zhao Rui was puzzled. Meng Qingyang asked, "Do you know who the man sitting by the bed in the ward is?" Zhao Rui shook his head in confusion. "Heh. Anyway, he has a big background. Not to mention you, even I have to look at his face for a living." Chapter 268. Just thinking about it scared him. Anyway, Meng Qingyang left with a peace of mind after giving him detailed instructions. Zhao Rui did not know the inside story, but as a doctor, his duty was to take care of people's problems. This was his job, so he would not neglect it. After sitting in the ward for a while, Yu suddenly looked up at Yun Shishir and said coquettishly, "Mommy, Yu is hungry." "It's empty. Is it growling?" As he spoke, he pouted and silently flattened his little belly. His pair of innocent eyes blinked at her, looking very aggrieved. Yun Shishir immediately asked gently, "Yu, what do you want to eat?" "Mommy will go to the supermarket to buy it for you." There were many 24-hour convenience stores and cake shops near the hospital. It was very convenient to cross the road. But it's so late. Yu is really worried. Suddenly, his eyes lit up. He clasped his hands together and said softly to Li Hanlin, "Principal, why don't you accompany my mommy?" Li Hanlin immediately understood and nodded. Yun Shishir was a little embarrassed and declined, "No, thank you. Yu, it's so late now. Why don't you let the principal go home early?" "It's okay. The principal has always been very kind." "Mommy, you're so weak. What if a bad uncle kidnaps you in the middle of the night? Principal Li is very powerful. He can protect you." "Yeah, it's not too late anyway. I'll accompany you to buy things, send you upstairs, and go home. Don't worry about it. I like Yu very much. I already treat him as my own son." As soon as Li Hanlin finished speaking, he suddenly felt the sharp gaze of the man beside him, which was as sharp as a knife, on his face. Mu Yaja looked up and fixed his cold eyes on him. There was a hint of displeasure in his expression. It was as if he was questioning his words. "Treat him as your own son?" If looks could kill, he would have been cut into pieces. Li Hanlin took out a handkerchief and wiped off the cold sweat on his forehead. This father and son were so alike. The little one's aura was already intimidating enough, the bigger one's legs would turn to jelly with just one look. At that moment, the atmosphere in the ward was a little strange. Mu Yaja, Little Munchkin, and Li Hanlin exchanged glances. Yun Shishir did not notice anything unusual about the three of them. She only thanked Li Hanlin gratefully, "Thank you, Principal. I still don't know how to thank you for this matter. It's so late, let me treat you to a cup of coffee." The two of them were about to leave, but before they could step out of the ward, she felt a tug on her arm and was pulled back. Mu Yaja had one hand in his belt. He leaned over slightly and whispered in her ear, "Come back soon, okay?" I don't like you being with other men," Mu Yaja breathed into her ear with a devilish smile, but there was a hint of warning in his eyes. Yun Shishir's face turned red from his domineering and ambiguous words. She glared at him with her clear eyes, wanting to say something. "Who are you to control me? Isn't it my freedom to be with whoever I want?" "Little mouth, you're quite fierce, huh?" Mu Yaja was displeased. He gently bit her lip, not caring that they were in front of Li Hanlin. Li Hanlin stood at the side, not knowing where to look. Chapter 269. Fooling around? How is this fooling around? Yun Shishir lowered her voice. "Don't be naughty in front of the child." Mu Yaja's lips curled into a devilish smile, but he did not heed her advice. As if deliberately going against her, he kissed her on the lips again. Li Hanlin was caught off guard by the public display of affection. He didn't even have a chance to dodge. His mouth was stuffed with a bulging bag of dog food. He only felt that he was so redundant standing there and couldn't wait to escape. Yun Tianyu, who was sitting on the bed, was stunned by the man's abrupt action. From his angle, he couldn't see what the man was doing. He could only see that he was lowering his body, and his well-proportioned body almost blocked his line of sight. He could only vaguely see that his mommy's face was flushed with an ambiguous blush. At that moment, something seemed to explode in his head. He angrily grabbed the pillow and punched it. Still, he could not help but ask with a fake smile, "Mommy? What are you and Uncle Mu doing?" Yunshirsher awkwardly pushed Mu Yaja away at once. The man's face did not show any signs of unnaturalness. He raised a finger and slowly said, "Shoo. I'm whispering to your mommy." The devilish smile on his face was obviously a blatant provocation to him. Yun Tianyo's lips curled into a smile, but the expression in his eyes had long been distorted beyond recognition. The corner of the blanket in his hand was also crumpled into a ball from his ravaging. Yunshirsher, who was standing at the side, felt even more awkward. Whispering. "This man is really..." Yunshirsher suppressed her anger and smilingly said to her son, "Mommy will go buy bread for you now. You must be good and not run around in bed." With that, she warned Mu Yaja, "Professor Mu, please take care of my Yu. I'll be back soon." With that, Yunshirsher and Li Hanlin left the room. Just as the door to the ward closed, the father and son faced each other in the room. Yun Tianyo's smiling face turned cold all of a sudden. The gentle and doting smile on the little lad's face when he looked at Yunshirsher earlier had long since disappeared. Mu Yaja looked at his serious expression. For a moment, he seemed to see his younger self in him. She was always cold and emotionless. She was always in a defensive posture, completely sealing herself in her own world. She had never opened her heart to anyone. Yun Tianyu looked at him coldly. His eyes were filled with vigilance, scrutiny, and indifference. Mu Yaja couldn't help but smile. He couldn't help but walk forward and sit beside the bed. Facing him sideways, he slowly reached out his hand and gently stroked his cold cheek. Yun Tianyo's face froze as his body stiffened. Almost subconsciously, he raised his hand and slapped the man's hand away. "Don't touch me." His words were cold and emotionless. There was only indifference. Thinking of his provocative behavior in front of him, he was filled with displeasure. Mu Yaja raised a brow in surprise. This little bun seemed to be full of hostility toward him. When Yunshirsher was around, he could still put on a smile to deal with him. When Yunshirsher was not around, the little bun could not even be bothered to put on a pretense in front of him. He suddenly felt that this little bun had inherited some aspects from his mommy. Chapter 270. He raised his eyes and stared coldly at Mu Yaja. Expressionlessly, he flipped the blanket aside and got off the bed. He slowly walked to the window, leaned against the wall, and crossed his arms. "Why are you here? Shouldn't you be at home accompanying your fiancé at this time? You're always pestering my mommy, it's so annoying." The moment he opened his mouth, the first word was full of thorns. It pierced through him so coldly that it was painful. Mu Yaja was not at all surprised by his indifferent and cold tone. This child was too sensitive. He carefully hid his most vulnerable side. Mu Yaja saw him leaning against the wall as if the huge wall was his only support at this moment. "Are you very pleased with yourself?" Mu Yaja looked at him with a raised brow. The little lad pursed his lips tightly. At this moment, he was like a little beast that had lost control and no sense of security. He hugged his arms tightly and suppressed all his anger and uneasiness. He repeated his words again. "Are you very pleased with yourself for bullying my mommy in front of me? Mu Yaja?" He called him by his name. Mu Yaja was not angry at all. He only curled his lips and slowly said, "According to seniority, you should call me Daddy." "Daddy?" Yun Tianyo's good-looking brow arched. "On what basis?" Mu Yaja said, "On the basis that my blood flows in your veins." Is this answer enough? The father and son, one big and one small, formed two extremes that were like fire and water. Yun Tianyo's eyes turned cold. Is it enough? Not enough. He suddenly raised his arrogant chin and stared straight at the man's handsome face. His tender voice revealed a firmness that could not be ignored. Do you think that just because we are related by blood, I should call you Daddy? I'm 6 this year. 6 years old. Have we met in the past 6 years? Have you ever fulfilled your responsibility as a father? Now, you suddenly appear out of nowhere and want me to acknowledge you as my daddy? As he spoke, his frail body began to tremble. Yun Tianyo's brows furrowed tightly. He lowered his head and gripped his wrist tightly as if he could suppress the anger in his heart. He lowered his eyes and said in a low voice, Wuxia, I think you're mistaken about something. It's not because we are related by blood that I should recognize you as my father. Wuxia was stunned. Yun Tianyu looked up at him and sneered. Did you carry me when I was born? When I'm afraid of the dark at night, have you ever sung a nursery rhyme beside my bed to coax me to sleep? When I was bullied by other children, did you comfort me by my side? When I was in kindergarten, all the children were taken home by their fathers. Where were you? Where were you when mommy was being bullied? Now, 6 years have passed. You appear out of nowhere and want me to call you Daddy. Wuxia, do you think you're qualified? His tone was not agitated, and his voice was calm and steady as usual. However, his childish voice was faintly trembling. Even though he was calmly narrating something that had happened to someone else, his words were laced with blood and tears that had long since dried up. Yun Tianyu coldly said, You'll never know how mommy and I have spent the past 6 years. Chapter 271. That's right. I didn't know that I had a father like you. Yun Tianyu continued solemnly, when I first saw you in the magazine, I honestly felt agitated, wronged, and regretful. After a pause, the little lad raised his head and his lips curled into a mournful smile. What I'm excited about is that I actually have a biological daddy. Moreover, the man who gave birth to me is so outstanding and outstanding. I was aggrieved because where were you for the past 6 years? Regretfully, no matter how outstanding you are, I can't entrust mommy to you. Wuxia's brows knitted tightly together. The little lad's accusation made his heart clench and almost suffocate him. It was not that he did not feel heartache. His heart ached so much that it felt as if a heavy rock was pressing down on it, making it hard for him to breathe. Initially, he was a little surprised by his son's intelligence, but more than that, he was astonished. He and Xiao Yichen were twins, but unlike Xiao Yichen, this child was more mature and steady. This level of maturity was not something that someone his age should have. 6 years old was the most innocent age in a child's life. Children at this age were more likely to enjoy the innocence and beauty of childhood. He, however, bore a burden that children his age should not bear. This maturity was only natural, though. Little Yichen had been doted on ever since he was born. With him as the center, Mu Sheng's love, as well as his doting, had never stopped revolving. Even Mu Wanru, who was not close to him, had always indulged him in all matters, big or small. Although she was not his biological mother, Mu Wanru still fulfilled her duty as a mother. Yun Tianyu was different, though. He did not breathe the moment he was born. There were only weak signs of life, and he almost lost his life. Relying on his innate survival instinct, he let out a weak cry and came into this world. However, he did not have Xiao Yichen's health and liveliness from birth. Before he was 2 years old, he had experienced physical torture and pain. Gradually, he realized that his body was not as healthy as other children. He also realized that he was different from other children. When he returned home, he was already used to Li Qin and Yun Na's sarcasm, ostracism, and unbearable humiliation. His childhood without a father was accompanied by bullying and humiliation, but he was never willing to mention it to Yun Shishir. Because of this, his mature personality was formed. Yun Tianyu clenched his fists tightly. Suddenly, he relaxed them and his voice returned to its usual coldness. Since I was born, I only have a mommy and no daddy. I didn't have one before, and I won't have one in the future. Wuxia asked. Biting his lower lip hard, he coldly spat out, that's because I don't need it. His voice fell, but there was a long silence. Until he spoke again. I like you very much. Tianyu, his body stiffened, his shoulders trembled. He asked gently, don't you like me? She carefully probed him, trying to find out his true intentions. Suddenly, St I like you a lot, these 5 words seemed to have some irresistible magic. In an instant, his uneasy heart calmed down, and his face flushed with shyness. Chapter 272. I don't need you to like me. It's enough that mommy likes me. This child was actually a little arrogant. I've told you before that you're not allowed to provoke my mommy. Wuxia, do you think I can't do anything to you? Wuxia did not make a sound. Looking at his reddened face, which was full of awkwardness and hostility, he curled his lips. The ward was silent for a moment. After a long silence, Wuxia stood up abruptly. His tall figure instantly made the entire ward seem small and narrow. The man's aura was so strong that Yu had no choice but to puff out his chest. Alas, it was to no avail that his aura was completely suppressed in front of the man. The father and son stood facing each other. The height difference was so big that Yu could only raise his head to look at him. His neck was a little sore. He was so tall. Just like what he had imagined, his father was really tall and upright. His stalwart body seemed to be able to withstand all kinds of wind and waves, it was indestructible. When he first met him at the gala, he could not help feeling envious of his outstanding height. How nice would it be if he could grow up to be as tall as him? However, now that this man was standing before him, he realized that he was more handsome than he had imagined. It was not that he did not feel envious. Tianyu muttered inwardly, he is so tall, can't he squat down? He raised his head to look at him. His height alone was enough to suppress him. As if telepathy between father and son, Wuxia seemed to have guessed his thoughts. He walked forward and half-squatted in front of him. Tianyu was startled. This man was friendlier than he had imagined, Tianyu. Wuxia calmly gazed at his face. His large palm gently caressed his cheek. This time, for the first time, Tianyu did not resist his touch. Or perhaps, when he gently called his name, the man's deep and mellow voice was tinged with tenderness. It was exceptionally pleasant to the ears. He sized up the man. The man was also sizing up the stubborn little munchkin in front of him. However, the boy did not notice that the man's fingertips were trembling slightly as they caressed his cheek. Little Munchkin's handsome and adorable face, his skin was soft and supple, and his pair of dark and watery eyes seemed to be hiding the beautiful moonlight. 6 years ago, he had thought that the child had unfortunately died. However, when the child stood in front of him in perfect condition, the man who had always been calm and steady lost control. Do you know who I am? I know. Tianyu, too, calmly looked into Wuxia's eyes and slowly said, Disheng Financial Group CEO, Wuxia. You're so smart. Wuxia gently pinched his son's cheeks, his eyes full of undisguised affection. Humph. That's nonsense. Tianyu retorted bluntly. Wuxia said, you're a little different from what I imagined. Oh? What's the difference? Yu was a little curious. The man frowned slightly and casually said, you're a little devil and a mommy's boy. Tianyu raised a brow unhappily. I'm a mommy's boy. What's wrong with that? Is there anything wrong with being a mommy's boy? If a son doesn't dote on his mommy, who will? Can you count on other men? He seemed to be hinting at something by other men. Chapter 273. Tianyu coldly retorted, how can you be in pain? Don't you have a fiancé? Wuxia, let me tell you, mommy is a treasure in my heart. If you want to dote on my mommy, it must be legitimate. Or do you treat marriage as child's play? I don't know what mommy is thinking. However, I won't allow a relationship without a proper status. The little guy was still young, yet he knew that he needed a proper status. Do you think that mommy is a woman you can toy with as you wish? Yun Tianyu arrogantly crossed his arms, his eyes cold. As long as I, Yun Tianyu, am around, no one can bully my mommy. You can try if you dare. There was no doubt in his threatening tone that he would not show mercy to those who bullied his mommy. The father-son pair's conversation was more like a negotiation, and it had already reached a boiling point. Wuxia lightly said, "You said that you will protect your mommy. I don't doubt your ability. However, have you ever thought that when you grow up and get married and have children, your mommy will be all alone again? Can you bear to do that?" Yun Tianyu firmly said, "I won't get married and have children. I will accompany my mommy until she grows old. I will stay by her side and never leave her." The little lad's eyes were exceptionally resolute when he said those words. "Don't you wish to have a complete family?" Wuxia pinched his little hand and gently placed it in his palm. His lips curled into a smile. "A daddy, mommy, and an elder brother?" Yun Tianyu coldly withdrew his hand from the man's palm and slowly said, "A complete family isn't enough. If we don't love each other enough, being together will only be painful." Wuxia was stunned. He did not expect this child to know so much. "If my mommy falls in love with a man one day, perhaps I will respect her choice. However, the prerequisite is that this man must love my mommy enough. Although I can't interfere in matters of the heart, it doesn't mean that I can sit back and do nothing. I won't let anyone hurt her." Yu suddenly looked at him and took a step closer to him. She poked his chest with her little finger and asked coldly, "If that's the case, then let me ask you, do you like my mommy?" Her soft fingertips poked at his chest, but she didn't use much strength. Wuxia suddenly fell silent. In fact, even he himself did not know what kind of feelings he had for Yunshishi. Like? What is like? In the world of love, he was like a blank piece of paper without any color. He didn't understand feelings, and he didn't know what love was. For as long as he could remember, he was like a marionette. It was only when Xiao Yichen was born and he looked at the baby's tender face in his swaddling clothes that he vaguely understood his father's feelings for his son. Emotionally, he was clumsy. He doted on and spoiled Xiao Yichen in every possible way. He wanted to give him the best in the world. Now, his heart ached for Yu and he loved her to the core. The more he looked at the boy, the harder it was for him to control that distinct and unfamiliar feeling in his heart. Perhaps, this was a father's love. This feeling of blood being thicker than water seemed to have seeped into his bones along with his blood. It was very clear. At the same time, he wanted to give him a warm family. In this family, there was a father, a mother, and an elder brother. He wanted to make up for the 6 years that this child had been missing. However, when this child poked his heart and questioned him, he was a little lost. Chapter 274. Did he like her? What did it mean to like her? If he had a strong possessiveness toward her, and this was considered as liking her, then he could answer that he liked her. However, he understood that possessiveness and desire did not mean that he liked her. Thus, he was momentarily at a loss regarding this question. Seeing his hesitation, Yu was displeased that he was still hesitating over this question. "You're hesitating for so long. I can tell that you don't like my mommy at all." Yu paused for a moment, his eyes revealing a hint of coldness. "Since you don't like her, then, why are you still provoking my mommy?" "You have an older brother," Wuxia suddenly said. Yu was stunned for a long time before replying, "I know." Why did he suddenly mention that child? Yu looked at him in confusion and did not speak again. At the mention of Xiao Yichen, a doting smile appeared on Wuxia's face. "His name is Yichen. He's as tall as you. When he stands next to you, even I can't tell who is you and who is him. Yes. Yu Yu's eyes suddenly became a little dazed. He knew that he had an older brother. In fact, he did not reject this older brother, it was just that he subconsciously resisted him. However, hearing Mu Yaja mention him, he was a little more curious about this older brother of his. Perhaps it's telepathy between brothers? He always mentions to me that he has a younger brother. Mu Yaja looked at him and smiled. At first, I thought that he was just a child's babble. Now, I find it incredible. I can't help but marvel at the wonders of the Creator. As soon as he finished speaking, Yun Tianyo's face was filled with disbelief. At the same time, his eyes could not help but become a little dazed. He dreams of me? Yes. Mu Yaja said lightly, I want to give him and you a complete family. Yu, are you willing? His thin lips opened and closed as he gently called out her nickname. In an instant it was as if there was some strange emotion piercing her heart. Caught off guard, an inexplicable feeling spontaneously arose in her heart. A complete home, a home where he had a father, a mother, and perhaps a brother who loved him dearly? In front of him, this man was gently asking for his opinion, asking if he was willing. Willing. Ah, his heart longed for it so eagerly. However, when he opened his mouth, he said with an awkward expression, I don't want to. The man's expression did not change. Obviously, he was not surprised by his answer. Not to mention letting a 6-year-old child accept his identity as a father, even for himself, it took a lot of effort to digest the unexpected news that he had a 6-year-old son. Moreover, the child in front of him was extraordinarily intelligent and had his own opinions. From the conversation, the child's every word was to protect his mother. He did not give him a way out and pressed him step by step in order to test his feelings. Standing in front of him, he did not have the slightest bit of stage fright or fear of strangers. He was calm and decisive. When it came to his mother's happiness, there was no room for subtlety. His thoughts were also very clear between the lines, and his negotiation methods were also exactly the same as his. With just a few words, one could tell that he was a capable person despite his young age. From that sentence, Mu Yaja, let me tell you, mommy is a treasure in my heart. If you want to dote on my mommy, it must be justified. To the child, the most important condition for his happiness was his mommy's happiness. Chapter 275. Yu said coldly, it's not enough that you like me. My mommy has to like you as well. Mu Yaja's eyebrows twitched. He was a little impressed by this child's domineering and arrogant attitude. As expected of his son, his every movement was filled with the demeanor of an imperial lord. Yu suddenly smiled. The elegant curve of his lips made him look like a polite little gentleman. Mu Yaja, you better be clear about one thing. Maybe in your mind, your love is a great gift to other women. But to my mommy, this is just the basics of true love. My mommy is beautiful, gentle, and considerate. Moreover, she has me, her son, to dote on her. If you want to be with my mommy, both of you must like each other. Do you understand? Huh? So you're saying that I still have a chance? Mu Yaja asked. Yu glanced at him from the corner of his eyes and snorted. Yes, it depends on your performance. Then now. Mu Yaja suddenly opened his palms and looked at his delicate and beautiful face gently. He asked softly, can I hug you? His gentle and mellow male voice was filled with the love of a loving father. Yu's heart suddenly stopped. His watery eyes widened slightly and his heartbeat slowed down. Thump, thump. Seeing that he was hesitating, Mu Yaja nodded and waited for his response. Hug. Yu hesitantly stuck out the tip of his small tongue and moistened his dry lips. He looked at Mu Yaja's broad and warm chest with a faint desire in his eyes. No child could resist their father's warm hug. Little Yu was the same. His eyes suddenly felt a little sour and astringent. In his heart, he was a little excited and yearning. When he was young, after kindergarten, he would see children his age running into their father's arms and being hugged by those strong arms. Those images always hurt his eyes. Mommy's hug was soft, but Mommy was too weak. When she hugged him, it was always a little uncomfortable. If he could be hugged by Daddy, it would be very blissful. Strong arms, warm chest, and strong heartbeat. Sitting on his shoulders, he felt as if he could touch the sky if he reached out. That feeling must be very blissful, right? With a little yearning, Yu could not help but reach out his hand. It was as if his entire body was enchanted with some kind of irresistible magic, and he yearned for his chest. Muyaja's eyes were warm as he held onto his little hand. Yu was Yu's hands. His hands were small hands. Hands should be soft and tender. Although her small hands were small, her 5 fingers were slender and smooth. Her fingernails were clean, and her joints were distinct. They were very beautiful, just like his hands. They were soft in his hands. With a gentle squeeze, he easily wrapped his hands in his palms. Muyaja realized that he liked this son of his very much. He was smart, sensible, considerate, and overly mature. One could not help but feel tender affection for him. Yu suddenly shrank back. His expression was a little awkward. Looking at him, his cheeks were red and a little hot. As if he was afraid that the man would misunderstand, he immediately emphasized his position. "I'm letting you hug me because of Mommy." Muyaja paused for a moment and smiled. "Okay." Chapter 276. But even if I let you hug me, it doesn't mean that I approve of you. It still depends on your performance. Although little Munchkin said no, his face was getting redder and redder. He was obviously a little shy. He looked awkward, but deep down, he was yearning for this hug. Muyaja could tell that he was feeling awkward, but he pretended not to know. He only nodded and said, "Okay." "Just once, just this once," Yu repeated. When the man nodded again, he pursed his lips and took a step closer to the man nervously. One step at a time, and then another, until Muyaja's muscular arms reached under his armpits and hugged him firmly into his embrace. In an instant, Yu's face was burning hot. Muyaja scooped up the little lad, his left arm supporting his little butt effortlessly. The child was too skinny. Was it because of malabsorption or malnutrition? Or was it because that stupid woman didn't nourish him properly? Children at this age were still growing, so they should eat more. Yet, he was so skinny. This was the similarity between mother and son. But he didn't know that it wasn't that Unspoken didn't pay attention to nutrition, but that little Munchkin's body was naturally weak and couldn't absorb enough nutrients. No matter how much he ate, he didn't gain weight. Hugging the little lad, who was as light as a feather, the man lowered his head to look at him. Yu, on the other hand, lowered his head shyly and buried his face in the man's arms. He was afraid that the man would catch a glimpse of his blushing face. What was this feeling? An unfamiliar fatherly love. It was the fatherly love he used to yearn for. His strong arms seemed to be able to hold up the sky. His warm chest seemed to be able to melt the coldest snow in winter. Yu carefully placed his head on his chest. What responded to him was a strong heartbeat. The tip of his nose suddenly felt sour, and a faint blush appeared on it. Unknowingly, his thick eyelashes had become wet. So warm, thump, 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 it was like the sound of a drum. Somehow, listening to the strong heartbeat, he felt an inexplicable sense of security. Unknowingly, he fell asleep just like that. When Unspoken returned with the bread and milk, little Munchkin was already fast asleep in Muyaja's arms. When he opened the door, this was the scene that greeted him. She saw Muyaja sitting on the edge of the bed with little Munchkin in his arms. Under the dim light, little Munchkin's face was rosy and his long eyelashes covered his eyes as he slept soundly. Li Hanlin, who was following behind him, also stopped in his tracks. He was afraid that he would wake up the little prince from his sleep. Wuxia heard the sound of footsteps and looked up to see that she had returned. He put a finger to his lips, indicating that she should be careful. Yunshushi understood and turned to Li Hanlin with an apologetic smile. "Principal, thank you. Yu is asleep. It's late now. You should go back." "You're welcome." Li Hanlin smiled and could not help taking another look at Yuntianyu, who was sleeping soundly in the man's arms. "Oh, this little bun is cuter when he's asleep. He's more like a docile 6-year-old child." Sigh. Li Hanlin sighed and said to Yunshushi, "I won't stay any longer. I'll take my leave first. See you next time." "Okay. Goodbye, Principal." She closed the door and the ward regained its silence. Chapter 277. Yunshushi placed the items on the bedside table and sat down beside him. For a moment, both of them were silent. Initially, when she saw the man carrying the child with such a gentle expression, her heart fluttered. However, she couldn't help but feel worried. Would this man change his mind after seeing the child? Would he bring the child back to the Mu family? Although this man had tacitly agreed that she could keep the child by her side, he had never said that he would give up the child's custody. The wealthy had always placed great importance on passing down the family line. After all, this child was his flesh and blood. Even if he agreed, would the Mu family behind him agree to it? They probably wouldn't agree to it. Yunshushi couldn't help but feel vexed. She was not attentive enough. She should have protected the child well. Now that his identity had been exposed, she was in a very passive position. Wuxia carried little Munchkin quietly and lowered his head to look at the child's tender little face. His expression was focused, and he didn't know how much time had passed. Yunshushi was surprised. She was a little surprised. In her impression, this man had always been known to be domineering. When she first met him, he appeared in the dark room with a cold aura. His every move was indisputable, just like a high and mighty overlord who wouldn't allow anyone to resist or defy him. No matter how scared she was, the man didn't care about it at all. When they met again 6 years later, he was still as arrogant as ever. Yes. From the moment he was born with a golden spoon in his mouth. Born as a crown prince, he lived a life of luxury and wealth. He was born arrogant and haughty. However, at this moment, the man in front of her was so quiet and even more patient than she had imagined. What surprised her even more was the way he carried the child. There wasn't a trace of awkwardness. Little Yu could sleep so soundly in his arms. Did he often carry Xiao Yichen to sleep like this? He must be very experienced. However, with his status, he should have hired a group of servants to take care of the child, right? Or would he do it himself? After a long period of observation, the man suddenly raised his head and looked at her. When their eyes met, Yunshushi was slightly shocked and immediately retracted her gaze. There was another long silence. Yunshushi looked up at him, but saw that the man was still in the same position, as if his arm would never be sore. That was amazing. When she carried Yu for 2 hours, her arms could not take it anymore. They were sore and painful. "Aren't you tired?" Wuxia raised his eyebrows and shook his head. "I'm not tired. How about I hold him for a while?" Yunshushi said. Wuxia gazed at little Munchkin's face and said slowly, "No need. I want to hold him for a while longer." Yunshushi mumbled, "That's amazing. Don't your hands get sore?" With a doting expression, Wuxia faintly said, "Xiao Yichen always had nightmares when he was young. Every time he woke up, I had to coax him to sleep." Yunshushi's heart skipped a beat. When he mentioned Xiao Yichen, she felt as if there was a warm and sour feeling in her chest. "Why do you always have nightmares?" Wuxia frowned slightly, and there was a hint of confusion in his eyes. I dreamed that someone bullied his younger brother. Xianxia was stunned. What is this dream? I don't know. Wuxia narrowed his eyes. Maybe it's the telepathy between the twins? Chapter 278. Just as he finished speaking, a series of footsteps suddenly came from outside the door and stopped at the door of the ward. Knock, knock, knock. There was a knock on the door. Xianxia frowned and walked to the door to open it. Standing outside was her father, who looked weary and worried. She did not know why, but he seemed to have aged 10 years overnight. Startled, Xianxia looked behind him and did not see Li Qin and the rest. Seeing her guarded look, he quickly said, "There's no one else, I'm the only one here." Dad. Xianxia looked at him with a complicated expression. She wanted to say something, but no words came out. Helplessness, heartache, guilt, and determination were written all over her face. He saw it all. He really owed this child too much. This time, he came here to sort things out. Xianxia, I'm here to see you. I also want to talk to you about something. Xianxia's lips curled up. Dad, you is fine. The doctor said that he's fine now. It's probably an old illness, so he's asleep now. Xianxia sighed and said slowly, "Don't worry, I'll just take a look. I'll leave after that." Xianxia nodded and opened the door slightly. Xianxia walked in and, as if he did not see Wuxia standing at the side, walked straight to the bed. At this moment, Yu had been carefully carried to the bed by Wuxia. He was covered with a blanket, looking peaceful and docile. Xianxia sat by the bed and looked at his weak appearance. He wanted to reach out to comfort him, but halfway through, he retracted his hand in annoyance. His face crumbled and was full of pain. "I'm not worthy of him calling me Grandpa, Dad." He suddenly stood up and walked to the balcony. He waved at Xianxia and called her over for a talk. Xianxia immediately went to the balcony and closed the door. The father-daughter pair looked at each other for a long time. After a long silence, Xianxia suddenly burst into tears. "You've suffered all these years. It's father's fault for not being able to protect you and letting you suffer so much." As soon as he finished speaking, Xianxia's eyes immediately turned red. No one could understand the complicated feelings in her heart at this moment. All these years, Xianxia had always treated her like his own daughter. Even though Li Qin and Yunna had never accepted her, at least he had fulfilled his responsibility as a father when it came to her food and clothing, no matter how big or small, at least. They were not related by blood. More than a decade ago, Xianxia had become infertile due to his illness. Li Qin had always wanted a son, so the two went to the orphanage to adopt a boy. At that time, when he first met her, it was in a dormitory. Xianxia stood by the window and looked at Xianxia, who was only 9 years old at that time. She hugged her body and curled up in the corner of the room, trembling. Her eyes were lifeless and her face was ashen. Taking a closer look at her body, it was covered with wounds. His face was green and purple, and his mental state was very poor. For some reason, Xianxia felt a throbbing pain in his heart. This child, be it her facial features or temperament, was very beautiful and pleasant. She looked like a very obedient child with beautiful eyes. However, for some reason, she was the only one in the empty dormitory, hugging her knees and trembling in fear while the other children were playing outside. She must have been bullied by many children, right? Chapter 279. The teacher behind her looked embarrassed. Back then, Xianxia had a successful career and had some prestige in the area. The teacher kindly reminded him, "Mr. Yun, have you taken a liking to this child? None of the teachers or children in the orphanage likes her. She seems to be a little autistic and has some mental issues. She doesn't like to talk and always has a gloomy face. She looks unlucky. Besides, she stole from another girl before, so the children ostracize her." Stole? Li Qin frowned and immediately said, "She can't steal. how can she have such a bad habit? Yecheng, don't waste time. Let's go see the other children, don't talk. Yun Yecheng stopped her and said to the teacher in dissatisfaction, man is born kind. The child is so young and hasn't formed a good sense of honor and disgrace. Even if she made a mistake, as a teacher, shouldn't you guide her on the right path? Look at her, she's been bullied to this extent. You say that she has some mental issues, how can she not have any? The children around her are bullying her, and the teachers don't care. What can a child like her do? The teacher was embarrassed by his righteous words and then led Yun Shishir out. Standing in front of Yun Yecheng and looking at the man's incomparably kind face, Yun Shishir was so scared that she shrank into a corner with her lips trembling. I'm not a thief. I'm not a thief. Don't arrest me. Yun Yecheng did not know why, but his heart felt like it was being stabbed by a knife. Even though he knew very well that he was not related to this child by blood, his heart ached so much that he almost could not breathe when he saw her fragile state. Hence, despite Li Qin's repeated objections, he still decided to adopt her. Thinking back, Yun Shishir was still grateful to him. If not for Yun Yecheng's redemption and giving her a second life, she did not even know what would have happened to her during that dark childhood. No matter how Li Qin and Yun Na treated her, she had always been grateful to Yun Yecheng. He was silent for a long time before he slowly said, I've decided to divorce her. We'll go and get the divorce done tomorrow. The her he was referring to was naturally Li Qin. Yun Shishir was surprised to hear that. Divorce? Was her father going to divorce Li Qin? Yun Shishir tried to talk him out of it, while her husband only looked at her quietly. After a while, she decided to tell him what was on her mind. Dad, I support your decision. It's wise to divorce her. I know. I know. When it comes to marriage, we can only persuade them to reconcile, not to divorce. But Li Qin is too greedy. You'll only be a burden if you stay with her. Dad, why do you have to tire yourself out? It doesn't matter if I'm tired or not. I'm already so old. For a man of his age, he would make do if he could. Half of his body was already in the soil. If he were to get a divorce at this time, it would be unpleasant for anyone to hear about it. It was inevitable that people would gossip about it. But in the end, he couldn't bear to implicate his daughter. You, on the other hand, I feel the most guilty towards you. I even found out that she was the one who forced you to do what you did 6 years ago. I'm such a bastard. As he spoke, he stomped his feet and slapped himself hard. Chapter 280. He replied slowly, it's all in the past, but I can't forgive her or let her go. As he spoke, he took out a handkerchief from his chest pocket. Inside it was a well-wrapped bank card. He looked at her. There's more than 5 million yuan in here. 5 million yuan? Yes, he continued. This is the additional remuneration that your previous employer gave you. This was a check for 5 million yuan given to him by Mu Yaja's assistant. He did not touch a single cent and deposited it all into this card. Later on, the money he earned from his part-time job was also deposited into this card. Although it was not much, it was still a token of his sincerity. He saved this money for Yun Shishir's dowry when she got married in the future. He was already old and did not have much capability. He was no longer as spirited as he was when he was young. His monthly salary was about 3,000 yuan. After deducting all his living expenses, he had not touched a single cent in the card for the past few years. He had always kept this card with him. Even Li Qin did not know that there was so much money in it. This was to prevent her from getting greedy when she found out. Even Yun Shishir thought that this sum of money had been used to repay debts back then. When Yun Yecheng came looking for Yun Shishir after Yun Na's accident, he wanted to find an opportunity to discuss this matter with her. He thought that with his daughter's accident, he had no choice but to ask Yun Shishir to withdraw tens of thousands of yuan from the card for urgent needs. He thought that she would agree to it given her gentle and considerate personality. Who knew that he would suddenly find out the truth of what happened 6 years ago? His world had been turned upside down and he could not accept it for a while. Now that he had made up his mind to divorce Li Qin, this card should be returned to its rightful owner. Although the property prices in the capital are rising day by day, the money in this card is enough to buy a decent house. Although I've divorced that woman, we're still father and daughter. If you're free in the future, you can bring Yu home to have a meal with me. That's enough. Dad, this money, Yun Yeqing said, this is your money. I didn't tell you earlier because I was afraid that woman would remember it. Daddy was keeping it for you, and now I'm returning it to its rightful owner. With Yu around, you must be living a tight life. Now that Yu was hospitalized, it was time to spend money. This sum of money should be able to solve the problem. Thank you, Dad. Yun Shishir took the bank card and smiled. Dad, you divorced her, but you also said that our father-daughter relationship is still there. You should live with us. I'll take care of you and Yu. Yun Yeqing hesitated. That's not good. It's not like you don't know that woman's character. Greedy for glory and splendor, he had always been used to being extravagant. If I were to stay with you, she would definitely come over and make a fuss again. I'm afraid that you and Yu wouldn't be safe. Now that you're successful, you can't let her drag you down. Yun Yeqing spoke with sincerity. He was truly thinking of the mother-son pair. After all, given Li Qin's character, she would definitely not let the matter rest. Yun Yeqing used that woman to refer to Li Qin. It was clear that he was extremely tired of this failed marriage. Chapter 281. Yun Shishir replied, "What's there to be afraid of, Dad? As long as you don't let yourself be blinded by them and see their true colors, I'll be at ease. I'll take care of you in the future. Do you want me to watch you grow old and have no one to depend on? You've raised me since I was young, I'll definitely repay this favor." Repay? It was clear that he owed her so much. Yun Yeqing was both vexed and touched. His lips trembled as he nodded repeatedly. Although Yun Shishir was not his biological daughter, she was more filial than a biological daughter. Although he had given birth to a good-for-nothing ingrate, he was relieved to have such a considerate daughter like Yun Shishir. This time, he did not reject her and only said, "Let's talk about it some other time. If I divorce her, she'll definitely not take it lying down. When the time comes, she'll make a fuss about splitting the family assets. You'll definitely be implicated." Splitting the family assets? Yun Shishir said angrily, "Do you still want to split the family assets with that kind of woman? I won't share it with her. Fortunately, I didn't do anything stupid back then. When I bought this house, I registered it under your name. Even if we get divorced, she can forget about getting any benefits. This is an evil creature she created, so she should bear the consequences herself. I, Yun Yeqing, have never mistreated her. Even if we get divorced, my conscience will be clear. It's been hard on you." Yun Shishir was a little stunned. That small 3-bedroom apartment was a second-hand house he bought back then, yet it was registered under her name? When the father-daughter pair walked out of the balcony, they saw that the ward was filled with nurses. Yun Yeqing was stunned when he saw the handsome man standing by the bed. He seemed to have seen him before. At her father's question, Yun Shishir sized up Mu Yaja and said guiltily, he. This is my university professor. His surname is Mu. He's so young. Yun Yeqing was a little speechless. The man in front of him clearly looked to be in his late 20s. He was handsome and looked very young. The man raised his head. His perfect and exquisite facial features and handsome face made him look like a high and mighty noble. Just one look from him was enough to make one feel intimidated. He was clearly so young, but he looked extremely mature and reserved. His every movement had an extraordinary bearing. In front of him, it made others feel ashamed of their inferiority. Even Yun Yeqing could not help feeling uneasy. So, you're Shirshir's university professor. Nice to meet you. You look so young. Mu Yaja also cooperated and nodded, but did not say anything. His attitude was very cold. What's going on? Yun Shirshir was surprised to see that the ward was full of nurses. Change wards, Mu Yaja said succinctly. Only then did Yun Shirshir recall that the director had previously mentioned that he wanted to change their ward to a special class ward. But, why were there so many nurses gathered here? She saw those nurses crowding around the ward's entrance. Their eyes were either stunned or filled with admiration as they sized up Mu Yaja. Initially, when the inpatient department director informed the young patient in this ward that he wanted to change to a special ward, a few nurses rushed over with the bed. However, as soon as they entered the ward, they saw this handsome man sitting in front of the bed, gently caressing the child's sleeping face. That perfect, godlike side glance instantly killed everyone. Gosh, the family member of a patient in Ward 702 is so handsome. How handsome is he? Chapter 282. For a moment, many nurses, who had nothing to do, gathered in the ward. The moment they saw Mu Yaja, everyone's eyes widened. Oh, God! He's so handsome and tall. He should be 9 meters tall. He's a whole shoulder taller than me. Oh, God! I wonder if he has a girlfriend? Is this child his son? He looks so much like him. Hence, the nurse's eyes darted back and forth between Mu Yaja and Yun Tianyu. Some were suspicious, some were shocked, some were disappointed, and some were desolate. Is he already married? Oh, God! This child should be 6 years old. Sigh. It's hopeless. A group of people whispered among themselves. Although their voices were not loud, they still disturbed the little lad, who was sleeping soundly on the bed. Yu Yu's brows furrowed slightly. Smacking his lips, he seemed to be really disturbed and kicked the blanket in dissatisfaction. Seeing that he was disturbed, Mu Yaja's face instantly turned frosty. Seeing this, Yun Shirshir's heart ached a little. She walked over to the nurses and said, "I'm sorry. Please keep your voices down. Don't crowd around the ward door, lest you wake the child." Seeing Yun Shirshir blocking her way, an intern nurse pushed her to the side in dissatisfaction. "Io, it's almost dawn now. The nurse on duty will be here soon to take his blood pressure. Besides, aren't you guys changing wards? Isn't it good that he's awake now?" "That's right. Some parents these days spoil their children too much." Yun Shirshir's face was tainted with a hint of anger. "Is this your work attitude?" "What do you mean?" The intern nurse, who must have just graduated, retorted without knowing the gravity of the situation. Someone at the side immediately tugged at her sleeve. "That's enough. Let's not talk about it anymore. We were a little loud just now." Are you that child's mother?" The intern nurse suddenly gossiped. "What's your relationship with this gentleman? I just heard from this woman that this man is her university professor. I heard on the news that a university professor is keeping a student as his mistress." Someone speculated in a low voice, "Could it be that this child is their private? Is that enough?" Yun Shirshir flew into a rage out of humiliation. "Do I need you to inquire about our relationship?" As soon as her voice fell, she saw their eyes widen in horror as they looked behind her. Yun Shirshir turned around belatedly, only to see Mu Yaja standing behind her. He impatiently swept his gaze over the crowd surrounding the door, his voice as cold as ice. "Scram." There was a hint of sharpness in his tone. With just one word, the crowd instantly dispersed. Clean and direct. The ward instantly became much quieter. Yun Shirshir sighed and was a little speechless. The procedures to transfer to another ward were completed very quickly. Not long after, the department director led 2 nurses to push a bed into the room and carried the little lad onto it. Yun Yecheng supported the bed and left with the department director. Before he left, he reminded Shirshir, "It's already morning. Professor Mu, thank you very much for coming to visit you. You haven't rested for the whole night, so let Shirshir send you downstairs." Mu Yaja exchanged glances with him, his eyes slightly cold. Yun Yecheng was intimidated by his gaze. After exchanging a few pleasantries, he hurriedly left.